say that we'll start with saying that this episode in Fire and Blood, early on, of course, there's still a lot of people who haven't finished the book yet and people who are still kind of digesting all the material. But as far as early returns go, this incident slash episode slash quest slash adventure of Elissa Farman and Sunchaser is definitely appearing to be one of the most popular, one of the most fun, one of the most talked about things so far in Fire and Blood. I'd say maybe, Ashaya, would that apply to you? Is this maybe one of your favorite parts in the book too?
No, definitely. I mean, I like all the exploration.
Me too.
That's why I like the Corlys Valerian stuff and the Alan Oakenfist. And anyways, I like those characters in particular. And Elissa Farman is no exception there. But plus, she has the added benefit for me of it being very gay.
Right on. Yeah, like I said in past weeks, we are going to try to pick up where we left off usually. But sometimes we can't do that because we're going to try to match up the topic with the guest. And also because, as it always is with A Song of Ice and Fire and A Song of Ice and Fire extended material like this, there's usually so much going on even at one time. So even if we're focusing on just one chapter, well, there's like 4 or 5 different stories going on. We talked about Arya Targaryen quite a lot last week, and and 2 weeks before that, really. And honestly, this all happens about at the same time as this Sunchaser stuff. So that's just a good example of 2 really awesome stories happening concurrently, but not having a whole lot to do with each other. But they do have a little something to do with each other, as we'll see moving through it. So let me reintroduce our guest here, LML. How are you doing, sir? And tell us what you're doing, what you're up to, and rank roughly where this Sunchaser episode falls for you in the pantheon of new stories and adventures that we've gotten.
Oh, it's number 1.
Heck
it's
yeah.
Absolutely number 1. There's no question. I was just basically, when I was listening to Fire and Blood, once I got the first glimpses of where the story was going, I was just like, give me more Elissa. Where's Elissa Farman? Like, give me. I don't want to hear this Jaehaerys stuff. I mean, Jaehaerys was great, but no, this is a show stealer for sure. We started chatting while you were having difficulties. I was chatting with the chat about just the tinfoil that this story tends to spawn. You know, any ideas of circumnavigation or northern passage where maybe the others came down in Essos? Like, this is the stuff of deep tinfoil and bulletin board theorized.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what everybody else comes with.
There's been a lot of theories about Elissa Farman, actually. I don't really subscribe to a lot of them, but there have been.
Yeah.
We'll chat about them a bit.
This is that fun time when all these ideas come out at once. Okay, so
what am I doing? I guess that's...
Yeah, go ahead. Hit us with that.
Can you hear me okay? Or is it...
I can hear you.
Seems like maybe there's a little bit of a lag. Okay, so you asked... I went right into the topic. You actually asked me what I was doing. So on my channel, we've been doing... just this past Sunday, we did a fun stream together, me and you, Aziz, and we talked about the Great Empire of the Dawn and how culture and perhaps... people fleeing the Empire might have shaped the rise of the Dothraki and the Sarnori civilizations, and their influence might have been felt in Karth. And we just went on a big detective hunt, so that was a great bit of fun. If you like, now I need to be louder. Oh, okay, I can accommodate you there. So if you like the Great Empire of the Dawn, which of course is kind of what put me on the map, our collaboration that we did a couple years ago with Aziz, then definitely check that out if you missed it. And otherwise, lately I've been exploring the green seer symbolism of Daenerys Targaryen, which is definitely confounding and interesting.
Very cool. Right on. Yeah, you're always doing lots of good stuff, lots of unique stuff. It's not, hardly anyone does the kinds of things you do, so everybody appreciates your unique takes on things. And this episode in particular, we're going to get, I know this episode, the Elissa Farman's adventures have plenty of symbolism to go with them, so you're going to be adding quite a lot to this, I'm sure. We've got a super chat from Marvin Martin, aka Marvin the Martian. Fireworms have faces and hands, and the High Towers describe the krakens as having hands. Another chimera or sea worm or something else? Thoughts? Interesting question. This is sort of a new exploration. This whole topic of fireworms, we've heard about them before, but we didn't know about the possibility that they might have hands. That's completely new. So, wow. I don't read it necessarily that way, that the krakens had hands, or that they were pulling it under. Did you guys take it that way?
They had actual hands? No, I didn't take that quote.
No.
They had actual hands. What was the line? I think I even put it in the document here. Now I'm curious. They said did they? I'm trying to think of what the exact word was. Anyways, you guys can keep going, but I am curious.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely come back to the Kraken topic one way or the other, as well as talking chimeras and sea worms. I'll bring up a reference to that. We did finish writing our Gogossos episode, which deals very heavily with exactly that topic. It's the first scripted.
Dude, I'm dying to hear that episode, man.
Right? It's the first scripted episode that we have that includes fire and blood material. So that's partly why it's exciting. But also, yeah, we're talking about fireworms. We talk about the Targaryens altering themselves. We talk about how that might apply to what the others are doing with other humans and half-human others and all that business. So it should be really fun. It's pretty speculative, pretty high magic-y, but also really cool, I hope.
Got another super chat from Thomas Pappas. Can we wish David Bowie a happy birthday? Always, of course.
Well, why not? Sure, yeah.
There's a star man waiting in the sky.
Yeah.
Definitely. Awesome. Happy birthday, David Bowie. And speaking of birthdays, last time we wished Tommy a happy birthday, and he felt the love and very generously sponsored several people himself to be patrons of History of Westeros. So that's something I suggested to Patreon. They should have that feature. Allows you to sponsor someone else. That's pretty cool. I imagine they would want that. So very gracious, very grateful we are for you, Tommy. Thanks for that. And yeah.
Aziz?
Yeah.
Could I get just real quickly? I want to address Marvin the Martian's question about the fireworms.
Yes, please do. Yeah, I forgot to get your take on that.
Well, not the entire take, but just general take is that I feel like Martin is continuing to develop the idea that the Valyrians engaged in every kind of blood magic experiment, genetic crossing experiment, humans and animals, dragons and humans. Basically, what I'm seeing is that like these experiments went all over the place, and I'm sure you're going to get into that into the Gogossos episode, obviously, but this is basically another thing. Like they also created parasites that are magical. They could be the same as the fireworms that tunnel through the ground. They could be a mutation. Maybe it's like a xenomorph thing where this parasite is combining with the DNA of Arya, and that's why it has hands and a face. I mean, who knows? I mean, George kind of wants to basically cause our imaginations to run wild and think of the darkest possibilities. So that's what this story is designed to do. But I think eventually it's going to lead to enough clues to where we can figure out how the blood of the dragon was created. I believe that he will give us the clues we need to figure that out before the story's over. It's one of the biggest mysteries of the story, really.
I agree. I don't think he'll spell it out explicitly like all these magic things. I'm sure you agree. We're not going to get like a definitive narrator, like a maester's going to write like a treatise on exactly how this works. But it's interesting to note, like you said here, that this stuff is kind of known about the Valyrians, that they do this sort of this genetic magic stuff. Septon Barth, the Araya incident, is what pushed Septon Barth towards that research. But he already knew, as we see in Fire and Blood, he already knew that the Valyrians made twisted abominations and such before he dug into dragons, worms, and wyverns and writing all those books that he ended up writing. So he knew that before digging into the rabbit hole. So it was at least somewhat common knowledge, at least among the learned. Probably not among the common folk, but hey. So while we have you, LML, before we get too deep, I want to get your take on something we talked about in a prior episode, just briefly, because it's right up your alley. Septon Moon is a topic that we discussed a bit over the last couple episodes, and we had a chat. We had a question from Duran Durandin, who I know is a follower of your show as well, and he mentioned the Septon Moon Garth Greenhand connection, and we didn't get into that discussion very much. It is a great connection. I had recalled discussing it on your show, which is probably why it kind of slipped my mind to talk about it on ours. Felt like I'd already talked about it, but it's a great little connection. So if you could real quick enlighten us.
Well, all he's lacking is antlers and green skin, basically. He's got all the other stuff. Like, he makes everyone pregnant simply by, like, being around them. Everyone brings their children to him just to be touched. They bring their maiden daughters to him to be impregnated. So it's like, I mean, it's almost over the top comical, the, like, virility of Septon Moon. And it's definitely a strong Garth parallel. And, of course, the whole Horned God Cernunnos mythology behind Garth the Green has a lot to do with the moon and ritual sacrifice by the light of the moon and the sickle moon symbolism and stuff like that. So with him getting his throat cut, that was a big, nod to that sort of sacrificial thing. And then, of course, the idea of he's a moon character who then goes around. It says he's like staggering around, bleeding into all the campfires. So you get the whole like blood and fire pouring out of the moon kind of a thing. So he's doing a simultaneous thing where he's like a Garth fertility character, just like Robert, but he's also sacrificed in a very symbolically significant way, just like Robert is. And then you get the whole moon symbolism of blood and fire pouring out of the dying moon. And a woman screaming, of course, that's the Nissa Nissa scream that cracked the moon. She runs out of the tent screaming as he staggers out bleeding. So it's pretty good stuff.
I like how you chose staggers, not stumbles or anything. Staggers. It has to be staggers. Yes. Well chosen words there, sir.
I'm a stag man waiting in the sky. Sorry.
So we got one question that was posed from last week's episodes. We have questions from people that we have incorporated throughout this episode, but one question from last week refers to the Targaryen retcon, family tree retcon. Now, one clever commenter pointed out that Viserys would be in the mix as far as the current storyline, or was, obviously, and how did that factor into the tree retcon from prior to the Dance of the Dragons? Well, it does. It actually does figure in, not quite as directly. Viserys, in the case of the past family tree, is the one that ended up being king after all of Jaehaerys and Alysanne's reign ended. And he was not truly the heir to the throne for more than maybe an hour or two, because he was really a claimant to the throne. His family was overthrown, so he wasn't the heir, unless you want to include the maybe couple of days between Rhaegar's death and Aerys' death, because, you know, typically if the first son dies before the king dies, it passes to the second son, not the son of the first son. That's where some of these succession things get a little tricky. Anyway, the point isn't for these things to all have one-to-one relationships, obviously. If George were just writing the same story twice, that wouldn't be fun at all. That would be repetitive and boring. The point is that he sneaks some of these things in there and makes it stand out in different ways. Real quick, did either of you guys want to weigh in on the retcon? Did you have anything to say about that, or did you think we covered it pretty well? Either you, Ashaya, or
I guess I think you covered it pretty well. I just have to say that I really do think that Aaron is a terrible name, and that's reason enough for him to change it. Anyways, that's my
Aaron. Yes,
yeah, Aaron Targaryen.
I agree.
Not a big fan personally. So yeah, I think it was Lady Gwyn who said she felt that way, and I completely agreed.
It's funny because there's a lot of people on Westeros.org who like that name, who were like, "Oh, Aaron, we barely knew ye." Yeah. I'm with you though. I think it's like how, in fact, later in this episode, I mentioned that George is a bit trolly for making an Elissa, an Alyssa, and an Elissa. Yeah. And
Alyssa.
Yeah, it's like he made it. It's the same as this name. Like if he had a Darren and just spelled it UN instead of ON, like it would be the same kind of thing. It's like, wait, that still sounds the same, even though it's spelled differently. So, yeah.
It's actually a really pretty name, though. Aeryn.
I am not against that name in general. I just don't like that name for Targaryen.
I like how it looks. I don't like how it just sounds like Aaron, though, which is nothing wrong with the name Aaron. It just
I really want an Aaron. That's what I'd love.
So there's a whole word tree with Aaron, Euron, Arion, Orion. There might be like
Aaron is kind of like Ares to me. It's just like a female version of Ares. Anyways, I don't, in that sense it's fine, but I still just want Aaron. So Kelly and Kelly.
Looks like a super chat from Adam Hofschild.
Ron.
First time seeing the show live. All you guys are awesome. Thanks. His nickname is Tormund Giantswang. Good nickname there. And thanks for the super chat. Okay, so let's see. I had like one or two other announcements. A couple of fun things have happened outside in the fandom sphere.
Hey, Aziz, while you do your announcements, I'm going to flip my screen off for like 3 minutes. Is that cool?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right, take it away.
So we have, one of them is that news came out that George R. R. Martin, his parentage is different than he thought, which is just so wonderfully ironic given all the fake parentage he's written about, and not just A Song of Ice and Fire, but some of his other works. That thing has come up once or twice. And so that's just hilarious that it looks as if maybe his grandmother cheated on his grandfather, and they're just now finding out. And apparently that show is tomorrow on PBS. The news had leaked already that this happened, but the episode hasn't aired yet. It's on PBS tomorrow, and it's so funny that George R. Martin is on alongside Andy Samberg of The Lonely Island, and that's just... I'm just tickled by the fact that George R. Martin is doing something with Andy Samberg. It just 10, 12 years ago, that just would have been...
I mean, Seth Meyers has been knighted by George R. Martin, so, he's well in that SNL crowd, I think, while Amy Poehler pulls out the sword. That's one of my favorite
He's
videos.
fully mainstream. It just doesn't cease to amuse me that these are happening. You're totally right, though. So that definitely check that out if you're interested. We're going to probably at least see what the result is of all that. See what George's reaction is to finding out that he's Ashakani. I can't say that word properly. Jewish, not and possibly not Italian.
Ashkenazi. Yeah, I didn't know what you were trying to even say with
that is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I was like, what is that word? I was like, okay.
Dang it! I'm like, I should be able to say that word easily, and I'm like, wait, why can't I?
That's what I am, Aziz.
Yeah, I know. That's part of why I should be able to say it.
Very offended right now.
I've only ever read it and written it. I've never said it out loud, I guess.
Russian Jews. But yeah, we have the other cool news about The Long Night, right, that we wanted to talk about.
Absolutely.
There was some good casting news there. Like a whole bunch of people were announced. We've already had some, and there's not really much spoilers or anything if you're conscious of that, but still a good sense of what might be in the show, because there's a bunch of black actors that they added. So it makes us wonder, are we going to see Summer Islanders? Is there more interaction between Westeros and the Summer Islands at this time period? Or maybe they're from somewhere else? Because there are, other Sothorios and other people of color around there. But there's some great actors in there, like Ivano Jeremiah, who's in that great show Humans, and he was in Black Mirror. Alex Sharp, who was in How to Talk to Girls at Parties, which was a great sci-fi film. People from historical dramas like Toby Regbo and Jamie
Last
Campbell
Kingdom,
Bowers.
yeah.
So who else? Oh, Naomi Aki, who was in this great show by Desiree Akhavan, The Bisexual, and she's also going to be in Star Wars Episode 9, so she's blowing up. But really just some really interesting people that they've cast, I think. It certainly made my mind start to think about it.
Right on. There's a couple of super chats. One from Fred Targaryen's Uncle Daddy. That's a great name, by the way. He says, Dragons rule, Kneelers drool. Rock on, guys. Thank you, sir. We will. We will continue to do that. Also, another from Marvin Martian. Speaking of family names, Prince Aegon called Fagon, F-A-E, being magical beings weak to iron, as in Fae like fairy. Magical beings on an iron throne slowly killing them off in one way or another. Coincidence or not?
I also think of Fae in like changelings and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
As it so happens.
That is a really cool catch, but I think it is probably coincidence because Fagon is a fan name. I don't think George has
I don't think he's ever said that.
Uttered that term.
Fake Aegon. Oh yeah, and someone else brings up Georgie Henley. She was in Chronicles of Narnia. I didn't mention her, but anyways.
Oh yeah.
In terms of the casting, they've gotten a good mix of people who have been in period pieces, some fantasy, and some sci-fi, I think, who have like some clout within nerddom.
Yeah, so I mean, it's too soon to be sure, but I'm pretty optimistic about the Long Night show. The casting looks very good. It looks like they're going to be creative.
Really what matters to me more than anything is the people creating it. To be fair, the directors and writers.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of that. We have one director who's done some stuff, but nothing really to like...
You're right.
Make me like, yes, I'm on board with anything this person does. So...
Yeah.
It remains to be said. In general, I feel like they can't mess it up too horribly, but I'll really be confident when I see what other writers they have.
I'm with you there. I'm definitely more... I would say it's more of a cautious optimism, but also it's bolstered by the fact that HBO just does have a great track record. I mean, obviously they've made some mistakes, but they have a very solid. So I'm definitely taking part in that. Okay, let us move on. For more news, about the casting spin-offs, the casting of the spin-off and any other stuff like season 8 rumors, etc., check out Watchers on the Wall, watchersonthewall.com. And Sean and I did an appearance on Night's Cast several weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that was fun. Night's Cast is the official Watchers on the Wall podcast, which is fairly new. It's launched in 2018.
You have me on, and you don't ask me what I have going on. So rude, Aziz.
Well, actually, you do have a guest appearance coming up. I was going to mention that.
Okay, I'm going to be on Girls Gone Canon. I think we're recording this Sunday, and they'll get that out whenever they want to.
Cool,
so
yeah.
I will be on that talking about Sansa/Elaine.
That's very cool. Yeah, we had Chloe on last week, and that was really good. And we're going to have Eliana on in a few weeks as well. So lots of crossover between History of Westeros and Girls Gone Canon going on. Also, if you missed the announcement a few months ago, History of Westeros is now on Spotify. And if you use Spotify, you throw us a subscribe over there. And maybe you prefer using Spotify to listen to your podcasts. Now, that's an option. Fire and Blood, of course, is available on audible.com, which is owned by Amazon. You can get a free pair of downloads by going to historyofwesteros.com and clicking on the Audible link. Those 2 downloads are, like I said, are free. You get to keep them even if you don't stay with the subscription. And hey, Fire and Blood on audio is pretty cool.
Are we on TuneIn now or whatever on Amazon? For Amazon Alexa? Is that in the works?
I
haven't checked?
I submitted us to it, but I don't know if we're on yet. It should have been
found out
automatic.
that Amazon, Echo, those Echo Dots, they have a podcast app, TuneIn, and we were TuneIn, right?
Yeah, TuneIn.
And we were not on it, so hopefully that'll be happening.
Yeah, most of the other shows are on TuneIn, and we're not. Most of the other, so that's kind of an oversight on our part, but we should be on there now. Anyway, okay, so let's get into the beginning of the Elissa Farman topic.
Wait for whatever this surprise is that LMO has for us.
Oh yeah, maybe he's got some new costume or something. Well, I'll start off with just some history and background on the House Farman and Elissa, so he'll have plenty of time to get ready still. So, of course, she calls herself Alice Westhill later, but at first she's Elissa Farman. Alice Westhill is just a pseudonym that she takes later. A little bit about House Farman. She is from House Farman, and they are...
She likes to stay far from men.
Hey, good. That's true. And they have... they live on Fair Isle, which is the only island in the West, and it is a very cool place.
Oh, yeah, we want a map shot of that now, don't we?
We do. We have a nice map shot of Fair Isle.
Here we go. Yeah, here it is there.
Like most island people, especially ruling houses, the Farmans are sailors. And in this case, the quote says that they have sailed the western seas since the Dawn Age. So this family has been sailing in the area quite a while. But as you can see from the map that Ashaya's got up there...
Very precarious spot.
Yeah, that is...
The Iron Island's just above.
Yeah, that is a dangerous place to be sailing around since the Dawn Age, because the Ironborn have been around there since then, too. So, you don't sail lightly in that area. So you got what we would say is a group of tough sailors, because they know that they have to deal with the Ironborn. It's kind of like Bear Island, where it's just a way of life. You know that the Ironborn are a threat that could come on you any minute. Their house motto is "The wind our steed."
Yeah, we learned that.
That's new information.
Yeah, new information. I thought that was nice.
And the Red Kraken is going to conquer Fair Isle prior to the dance or during the Dance of the Dragons, and then hold it until afterwards. And I'm pretty sure he was assassinated on Fair Isle when they were coming to take it back. So, well, there was no battle for it. He just died, and that was that. So, even though the Farmans are a seafaring people, the people of Fair Isle are seafaring people, Elissa is exceptional, even taking that into account. Like, she's a sailor amongst sailors. Like, she really stands out. She had this interest and ambition in sailing and using her talent more than just about anybody.
I think this was a beautiful quote. I think it really shows how, George really liked all this seafaring stuff, and I think he could write about it.
Yeah, please read it for us.
This quote was one of my favorites from the book, actually. Her dreams were full of sundering rivers and windswept plains and towering mountains with their shoulders in the clouds, of green islands verdant in the sun, of strange beasts no man had tamed, and queer fruits no man had tasted, of golden cities shining underneath strange stars. Very evocative, and just shows that she's a big dreamer, and George is too.
That reminds me of Lovecraft, the way that's written too, about how some of his wandering characters have
I think it's interesting that Gildane wrote that flowery thing as well.
Right?
Gildane, I think, was a little taken by these explorers, perhaps.
Yeah, Gildane likes the idea of traveling and exploring the horizon. It's a romantic thing for sure. It's a really cool idea, but to have the actual bravery and ambition to do it is like, whoa, that's just... Everyone wants to know what's West of Westeros, but only a couple people have the bravery. Oh, he's back, and he's horny.
Yes, I'm thematically horny.
Whoa,
I've
nice.
got my
Oh, in the backdrop.
yes. Yeah, ready to chase the sun. That's what
Hell
took me.
yeah. That is cool.
Changing the
man.
backdrop takes a good 5 minutes. I had to get the steam cleaner out and then get it all. In fact, here, let me just tilt this up a little. There we go. There we
That's
go. All
So
right.
cool.
Wow, now I'm in the spirit. This was
Yeah,
the
here
cost
you
of
are.
me getting in late. I didn't have the right,
Backdrop going, an outfit.
there's a backdrop for all occasions.
We love it.
Very
So
exciting.
we were just talking about the little bit of background on House Farman and getting into how special Elissa was from an early age. As we will see, it takes a lot to do what she did. We talk about we've already mentioned her ambition and that she was a sailor among sailors, but accomplishing what she did takes more than that. You gotta have charisma. You gotta have vision. You gotta have the shipbuilding skills. I mean, that part of
And
this
money.
was
Yeah.
and money. Yes, that was a huge part of this, and you need a lot of money because, as we'll see, people are not easily convinced to sail into the horizon into nothing. Like,
Yeah.
I'll
I'll tell you, I did do some research into like female explorers and stuff, and there's definitely a ton of female explorers, but in terms of female ship captains, that's far less common. It's really not very common at all. There are plenty of women that have circumnavigated the globe and have traveled really far extents, but a lot of them were not captains of their own ship, or by any means in the real world. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So Elissa Farman is ahead of the game.
That's partly an effect. I listen to the Pirate History podcast quite a lot. It's one of my favorite shows, and he's gotten into this very topic, which is that it used to be a superstition. Having women on board was a superstition.
So, a lot of them would disguise themselves.
Exactly. Anne Bonny disguised herself. Mary Read disguised herself. So it's kind of like Dany Flint, but on a boat.
Yeah. There's also a lot of women who joined the Navy and like military operations like that. Who pretended to be men. So there were lots of women explorers. There started to be a bit more once, anthropology and stuff like that spread, as women were able to do kind of the soft sciences, as they're called.
Word got out that women could like think and stuff.
But only anthropology. Don't let them do hard sciences.
And of course, it bears mention anytime we talk about female sailors and such that the most successful pirate of all time was a woman by far. It is not close. She was Chinese, so she's not super well known in the Qin Shi. And there's a History on Fire, which is a history show that we did a collaboration with early last year, about a year ago, almost exactly. Did a full episode on Qin Shi. History on Fire is the name of the show, and I think it's episode 25 or 28 or something like that. Really fantastic. She took on the whole Chinese Navy. Like, her fleet faced the Chinese Navy and won. Like, no Western pirate can talk about that. She got to retire. Mm-hmm. Like, she made a deal with the government, say, I'll stop if you let me retire and just take all my money. And they're like, yes. She got to retire with everything. Like, wow. Anyway, it's a great story, but it has nothing to do with this. So we'll move on. So her first appearance. Let's talk about Elissa's first appearance. She doesn't seem like she's going to be an important character when she's first introduced, because you have Rhaena, who's really important, and she's just one of Rhaena's friends, right? And Rhaena is the eldest of Aenys and Elissa. She's other Elissa. See, here we go with these Elissas, right? Elissa, Black Bride of Maegor, Rider of Dreamfire, Queen in the West, later Queen in the East. Like, she's really important. And then there's all these other characters around her, the saga of Maegor and the Jaehaerys and Alysanne. So it doesn't seem like Alyssa's going to be all that important. But all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, this character is popping up all over the place. She's 3 years older than Andrew Farman, who has his own sad, awful story.
Yeah. I think it was the story of Andrew Farman. I think was described really well by Nobody Suspects the Butterfly. If anyone follows her blog, she said it was straight out of tragic lesbian pulp novels. And it's exactly right. It's like this dark, like you could just see like ripped from the headlines and like little book, from years ago. He killed them all. Anyway.
I feel like that. I'm glad you bring that up, Ashaya. I feel like George writes some of that conflict that comes from homosexuality into the subtext of some of these character arcs. Like, we've talked about the Blackfish before as possibly somebody who could be asexual or could be homosexual, one or the other. But so what really struck me, and I just listened to this today, was when Mark Farman died and his brother took power.
Farman?
And the next day.
Yeah.
Really? That's amazing.
What?
That's awesome. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, you just
Farman.
enjoying the pun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he dies, and then his brother takes power, and the very next day he kicks Rhaena out, obviously with a lot of spite. And he's like, "But you will not be taking my sister. I will be marrying her to a man of my choice." I really read that as like, this is a guy that has a big problem with this relationship, and he specifically is like, you can just feel that like bigotry. I don't know. I feel like George is writing that into the subtext there. But
I think you're exactly right about that for sure.
That's a good catch. Yeah, because we know Alyssa was betrothed twice. And she scared off. It says she scared both of them off. We don't know what scared off means, but if there's a lot of
I imagine
potential
it like
reasons.
an Alana Tyrell type thing.
Yes.
I had I soon saw the end of that and all that.
It really fits. Like they could just be intimidated by how amazing she is at everything in a patriarchal society, right? Like a lot of us would be like thrilled to have a girlfriend with all those skills, but that's not the attitude of Westerosi in that time. Or it could just be that she wasn't into them. It could be the more mundane thing, like along these lines. She just wasn't into guys. It's that simple.
I think it is that simple. She didn't want to marry someone.
Not that would scare them, but still, it would be a turn off.
Just to address Joel Whitney's comment, yes, there is definitely a huge difference between being asexual and being gay. But the point is that Blackfish mysteriously refuses to marry. And there's this line where Hoster's on his deathbed and he's asking Kat, did he marry someone? Some woman, like any woman, like he's still, it really reads like a denial of like the truth here. But the point is, for some reason, Blackfish refuses to marry, and we don't ever get that reason, but it feels like it could be some private reason. Like either he's asexual or he's not attracted to women, he's attracted to men instead. It could be either one of those things. And other though they're obviously very different, they both could work as a cause for his
and to be clear, you can be asexual and still be gay as well, and you can be asexual and be mostly straight, as it so happens. It's
Thank
whatever.
you, yes.
So they're not mutually exclusive either.
And it could be neither. Blackfish, could be some other reason. It's like it's left for us to wonder. But obviously, he writes some gay characters into the book. He's conscious that gay people exist, and so we shouldn't wonder if he writes some of that into the subtext or the background of some of these characters too. So anyways, we can move along.
So even the Maester seems, at least the Maesters, a couple of them at least seem aware of this. Gildane quotes Maester Smike, which I think is a hilarious name, Smike. The queen found her true love on Fair Isle, not with Andro, but with his sister Lady Elissa. So they're not saying it's a sexual relationship. They're saying, but that's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's very clear. There's a lot of references throughout it to, the term favorite. And really, when you look at the use of the word favorite throughout the series, it has a certain connotation that is romantic, that is sexual by and large. You can see, there's examples like Queen Rhaenys, who obviously Rhaenys' parentage was up for question, and her singers and whatnot, people in her court, were called her favorites. Joffrey Lonmouth, who was Laenor Velaryon, who was definitely gay, was called the favorite of him. Princess Sarah in Fire and Blood in this book referred to all of her. She has male and female favorites, so it seemed like she maybe was seeing multiple people, but in the main series, the big one is Marjorie. She's the Blue Bard is referred to as a favorite of Marjorie, and it's insinuating that she's sleeping with him.
Yep.
So there's very notable terms used there, I think, for some of these.
And speaking of Marjorie, this kind of is a little similar to Renly marrying Marjorie, but actually wanting Loras.
It's weird.
Yeah, so Andro is Rhaena's beard, whereas Marjorie was Renly's beard. Also,
I will mention, in terms of The Favorite, there's a movie out right now called The Favorite that just won some awards with Olivia Colman and Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz, but it's all about these women they're gay, and the favorite is the gay lover of Queen Anne. So it's extra fitting. I just realized that. I just watched that the other day.
That's really cool.
I see. So we should when we see that word, we should understand the subtext.
I do think that there's meant to be the subtext, whether it's actually the case that someone they had a sexual relationship, or whether it's that someone's trying to insinuate and cast aspersions on them by saying it. It doesn't always have to mean that they actually slept together.
It's a very interesting word choice. That's a very good catch, though, about that the way that word is used. It's kind of like when we picked out the word rustling as the sound of a green seer trying to talk through the trees or something like that. It's a very distinct word. A favorite might mean gay lover. Not always, but yeah, it should be
or just
considered
lover
that way. Or just lover.
Or
Yeah,
just
it doesn't
lover.
gay. You're right. It's not gay
yeah,
at all. It's just lover. It's just often referred to a way to refer to gay relationships, but it's also used to refer to out of wedlock
Rhaenys
relationships.
And Marjorie, queens who are being inappropriate with their men.
Yeah,
so as it seems,
yeah, exactly. You're right. That's a better way to put it. Super chat from Scott McCloy, just for my 2 favorite channels. Wanted to say thanks for the great content. Well, thank you very much, Scott. We appreciate that. Let us take a step aside.
Oh, wait, I just want to mention real quick.
Sure.
I just have to also point out Elissa's ship's name is Maiden's Fancy before it's the Sun Chaser. Right? If that's not just so like crying out, she's gay and nothing is.
And also LML with your take on Franklin Farman and his, perhaps being upset or at least controlling about Elissa's relationships. I like how George wrote him as a goofball in that he gave him the kind of tropey comic book, like he fell into a ship full of fish, like he landed in a big pile of cod, which is just like, that's what happens to cartoon villains, right? When they land in a pile of fish or dung or garbage or something like that, something that's really smelly.
I just listened to that earlier today. I was laughing at it. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. They had this showdown on the docks and the people, he only brought 6 guards with him, and he underestimated the popularity of Elissa. It's like,
the crowd rising up to help is just, that's just straight out of some storybook. But it fits so well.
In general, I feel like the Farmans, Fair Isle, Fair Castle, it is like just like how we have like the Even Starved Hearth. These 2 isles here are these kind of storybook fairy tale type places.
They're kind of idyllic, aren't they? Yeah.
Idyllic. I don't know what how they're described. Blue eyes and flaxen hair and like
white towers by the sea.
Yeah. It really does. Like it does make me think.
The dragon named Dreamfire. Yeah.
We'll just let me know when we're going to talk about Dreamfire. I've got stuff ready, but
okay, cool.
I'll keep that at bay until you're ready.
Okay, so let's take a sidestep here. We're gonna do a parallel life episode here real quick. Last week I know I need a little music for that. So we have a bonus comparison. We've done Maegor, Gregor, and Aemond and Euron. Like there's kind of a 4-way meshing with those guys. They don't all line up so well. It's mostly like Gregor is kind of the centerpiece in some way, and Aemond, he connects to Aemond, and Aemond connects to Euron, and Maegor connects to Gregor.
I'm sorry, this sounds really dirty now. This sounds like a big old sword fight.
Well, we already have the 4-headed beast for Rhaena, and now this is a different 4-headed beast.
I was like, oh, what are they doing?
And that pun is actually really fitting for multiple heads, given who we're comparing Maegor to this time, Maegor and Gregor to this time. Okay, so I'm going to keep this one. This one I'm going to do like trivia. Some of these parallel lives, I just explain it because they don't work. The comparison, it doesn't work being sneaky. Sometimes it just is better to just explain it. But sometimes we can be kind of clever and cute with it and make it like trivia. So that's what I'm going to do this time. Okay, so the name convention is the same. It's 6 letters, and some of the letters are the same. This character also had a famous incident with a horse, killing a horse, just like Maegor and Gregor both did. This character is also hugely strong, just like Maegor and Gregor. This character is also a kinslayer, just like Maegor and Gregor. This character was killed by Barristan Selmy, who immediately became a Kingsguard, whereas Gregor is not truly dead, and Maegor might have been killed by his Kingsguard. That connection is maybe not as thorough or even there at all. And also I dropped this clue about heads. So, we'll come back to that in a couple minutes while we introduce some early stuff about Elissa, and while you guys ponder that. So think about that.
This one's a touch on the easy side for your usual ones, I have to say.
It is not a hard one. It's definitely not a hard one. But a couple people I think are probably going to need a minute on it.
Painkiller Jane got it first, which means we have to do her theory about who Elissa Farman is.
Okay. That sounds fun. Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say we can wait though.
Yeah, let's introduce the very basics about Elissa Farman, and then we'll run over that answer real quick. Okay, so very basic stuff. Her appearance, for example. Ashaya is going to pull up
some of
an
which
image.
We went into, but yes, we were going to. Did we skip? Yeah, we did skip an image. Oh well. We'll have another chance, I guess, to use the other one.
Okay. Well, here's her look from the book. She has the typical, apparently, for the Farmans, blue eyes and flaxen hair, which is a very Andal
which you
look.
Can see in the black and white of this book's art.
Yes.
As it so happens, you cannot see that, but you can see her cool piratey clothes, which I like. But the great Naomi Makes Art, who's been doing all sorts of Fire and Blood art, did do a piece of Rhaena and Elissa together there, where you can see the difference in like the more light platinum blonde of Rhaena versus Alyssa's blonde hair, and so that's on the screen as well.
Right on. Okay, so interesting comment here. This is something I just thought of right now. We're told that the Farmans have been sailing the Western Sea since the Dawn Age, but this is a very Andal look they have. But that fits. The Andals came in and married into all those families and kind of took them over that way. But that's just a good little piece of trivia. She's said to have spent more time at sea than on land, which is a phrase we've heard similarly with other characters, not necessarily with sea, like his throne was his saddle, or he ruled from horseback, or like the Dothraki, they learned to ride before they learned to walk. That's said about Lyanna, if I remember correctly. So that's just kind of the way of saying that they're natural born doer of whatever. In this case, sailing. We're told that she is sharp of wit and sharper of tongue. She loved horses, dogs, and hawks. Yeah. She was a fine singer and a skilled archer, but her great love was sailing. And it says that she climbed the rigging like a monkey, and that the Farman sailors would get a kick out of that. They really liked having her around. So she wasn't like the apparently these sailors aren't superstitious about having women on board, so that's good. And she sailed her own boat around Fair Isle at age 14, and by age 20 she had sailed to Bear Island and the Arbor, and was already speaking about sailing west, which freaked out her parents, even though this is a sailing culture. Again, all that has to be taken in context. So here's the point in our notes where we actually talk about the four-headed beast. So we'll go ahead and jump back to our trivia real quick. I think a lot of you got this by now. Of course, the multiple heads clue really gave it away, if not other things. It's Naelys the Monstrous, who had a second head a conjoined twin, apparently, growing out of his...
Yes, it's like me and little Lucerion here. This is my conjoined dragon twin that Melanie Lot 7 knitted me. This is
that's great.
Hello, my name is Lucerion. Yeah, he's cute as can be.
Yeah, that's very cool.
All right. Shout out to Melanie Lot 7.
So now let's talk about the four-headed beast. Ashaya, let's have you jump in with a little bit about them, and then LML, you can talk about
How
Dreamfire.
did you not do the from 2 heads to 4 heads segue?
We're doubling the heads. I'm slipping, man. I guess my wordplay is falling off. I'm so sorry, everybody.
The four-headed beast, and we notably all of these women do go flying on Dreamfire. Innuendo galore there, I suppose.
Flying on Dreamfire. Ride the beast.
That's a new meta. It's like hiking the Appalachian Trail, like going flying on Dreamfire.
Yeah, so they all did, but never Andra. He never rode. He didn't sleep in her bed, as we hear later. So that really confirms that she really. I don't know if they even consummated their marriage ever. I would be doubtful about whether she would have allowed him to do that. But Rhaena takes obviously Elissa Farman, but also her 2 other favorites, Samantha Stokeworth and Elaine Royce. And I really have a lot of questions about this. Obviously, some of them, it seemed like they might have had a romantic thing early on, but they all just became ultimately friends. Obviously, things went sour between Rhaena and Elissa, but they continued with Sam Stokeworth and Elaine Royce. Like, they seemed to be lifetime friends, really, and until the end of their lives.
Until Andrew, ruined all that.
But they whether I'm curious whether either of them were ever put out by being replaced. It seemed like Larissa was, from Driftmark, that was married off there. It seemed like Larissa was her biggest love before Elissa, you know?
I think so too.
And so whether it was
implied,
romantic
yeah.
with Sam Stokeworth and Elaine Royce, we don't know. Maybe they were all just gay and Sam Stokeworth and Elaine Royce were in a relationship. I don't know. I'm curious about more about them, actually.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't expect like to have a lot of information on, and because it's not the kind of thing that maesters would delve that into. They would be uncomfortable with the topic probably.
Yeah.
Them all being, I mean, most maesters don't get to have sex with anyone, let alone think about alternate relationships. So they're probably pretty stodgy about the whole thing. Probably pretty like, oh no, we don't want to talk about that. So
They're all in a little dark room reading a caution for young girls in the dark room.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So yeah, so LML, talk to us a little bit about Dreamfire. I think just before you start, I just want to again express something I expressed before, which is I'm just.
Well,
George...
I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about this. I've never ridden Dreamfire before, so
no man has.
Maybe I have. I guess it depends on what it means.
Yeah.
Well, this makes my little side comment here even more.
I'm sorry. All right, let's just elevate this here. I was accused of making a fool out of myself by wearing costumes, so I really it's up to me to like raise the bar here. So, Dreamfire is a pale blue and silver dragon, and I love dragon colors. They're always good for symbolism. Blue dragons always catch your attention. There's only a couple. There's Tessarion, the blue queen, cobalt colored dragon, so a dark blue, and then Dreamfire is pale blue. I think those are the only two that are confirmed as being blue, but it makes you think of ice dragon symbolism and stuff like that. And if you follow the Farman symbolism, it's fairly consistent. They got white towers. Their sigil has a blue and white pattern around the sunset. So you can almost imagine like the sun being swallowed by ice and by the others. And then we get Dreamfire going there. There's one time when Rhaena speaks and her voice is as cold as ice. And there's a few other things. I won't go on and on. I don't have it all written out right in front of me, but there's a pretty consistent line of ice symbolism going on. But what's really interesting about Dreamfire is that Dreamfire turns out to be the dragon that cracks open the dome of the dragon pit. When that happens, it's Dreamfire that flies up, who gets free of her chains, flies up and hits against the dome, and that's what collapses half the dome. And of course, the dome of the dragon pit is a terrific symbol of a moon that contains dragons, and when it breaks open, there's a bunch of blood and fire, and a crown of fire is worn by the dragon pit and all this stuff. And the idea of Dreamfire flying up into the dome, it's literally like a dragon trying to hatch out of an egg, but it's a giant stone egg. So it's a really good dragons hatching from the moon kind of symbol. And then the idea of Dreamfire also plays into some of my ideas about green seeing and how Azor Ahai and the Weirwood Net sort of intersect. So the idea of fire going into the dream world is like the idea of Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood Net. So and that's what leads to the others, and hence all the other symbolism of the Farmans. So without going, too ape crazy, it just a little bit of a taste there. Well, but check this out. Oh, I will give you this. All right. So the Farman words are the wind, our steed.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Greenseer talk. They're flying on the wind, but it's a horse, a windy horse that makes you fly. That's like Sleipnir and astral projection and some of the other stuff that I've been talking about lately. So
the wooden horses, as the Dothraki would call them in this case, right?
Yeah, that symbolism runs all through the Dothraki and House Valerion and their seahorse and stuff, because Dany's riding a silver horse around the Dothraki sea, so it's like a silver seahorse, and the sigil of House Valerion is a silver seahorse on green, and so George is tying those symbolisms to each other. But the last thing I wanted to say is that when Andrew Farman dies, he says, "I can fly too," and then he jumps from a tall tower. So you think of Euron saying, "How do we know if we can fly unless we leap from some tall tower?" So this whole like Greenseer. So there's basically there's a running thing of Greenseer symbolism going on there, and it's fun stuff. We myth heads are just starting to dig into it, so I don't have the full explanation for it, but it's definitely tantalizing. There's some good shit going on.
Yeah, that's a good example of like I said at the beginning of how there's all these great observations we have, but more observations are going to keep coming and keep coming and keep coming from all over the fandom and from everyone. It's going to be we haven't figured it all out by any means. Also want to point out that Dreamfire, there's a cool moment there where Rhaena is angry at Lord Franklin's ejection of her and her friends, And the Maester, I guess it's Smike again, writes his moment of fear, and it's really evocative. He has this vision of Dreamfire just blasting the towers and all this other stuff, and I thought that would probably stand out to you too, that the way that one was written. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the Dreamfire, they pictured exactly right. The quote is like he could see it in his mind now, Dreamfire, the white towers blackening and falling into the sea. And so anytime you see a white tower, you should potentially think of a weirwood, because a weirwood is a white tree, and towers and trees are very interchangeable as symbols. And when you have a white tower that gets crowned with flame, now it really looks like a weirwood, because the red canopy of the weirwoods is described as a blaze of flame, and the weirwood symbolically is like the burning bush of Moses, or like the burning tree as a symbol. So now think of Old Town. Okay, Old Town, when Silverwing went there, Silverwing landed atop the high tower and fanned the flames of the high tower. Now, the sigil of the high tower is a white tower, quote, with a crown of flame. So that's another weirwood symbol, essentially, especially since the high towers are associated with mystical sight and all the other good stuff and magic and whatever else. So it's cool because Dreamfire is a pale blue dragon in silver, and Silverwing is obviously a silver dragon. And so both of those are kind of similar in terms of symbolism, and they're both associated with these white towers and specifically breathing fire onto these white towers. And so it's the idea of, again, dragons landing or invading the weirwood and setting the weirwoods on fire. So it's
very cool.
It's a cool bit of symbolism there.
Right on. Super chat from Thomas Pappas. Elissa Farman parallels with Amelia Earhart and Magellan. We have that in the document already. We will be getting to that near the end. That'll be part of the legacy and long-lasting effects
of Elissa Farman and her influence on Magellan.
yes, she had quite an influence on Magellan. I believe Magellan cited her journey specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, so they all leave. They leave Fair Isle. Elissa gets to go, even though Franklin Farman wanted her to stay, and they go to Casterly Rock. And they had been to Casterly Rock before. Well, at least Rhaena had. She stayed there. In fact, that's where her kids were born.
Yeah.
And this time her hosts are a little creepy. They're like talking about, well, if you wanted to thank us for staying here, you could give us one of your eggs. And the Lannisters
I kind of prefer the green one, just
green and gold. Yes.
That's just my figured I'll say.
So this is probably not very fun for Elissa Farman to be hanging out in Casterly Rock. She likes sailing and being outdoors and doing all this stuff. So stuck inside the rock is probably not fun. But it's not fun for her friends either, because Rhaena's being treated creepily and they want her stuff. And they're talking about marriage. And Rhaena thinks they want to marry me and have their own dragon riders. And the mention, there's a line, they were kings once. And in this context, they were kings once is kind of understating it, because they were kings like 50 years before and for thousands of years. They've only not been kings for a relatively short period of time. And can you imagine a Dragon Lord kingdom at Casterly Rock? Like, that would be really powerful. They got this impregnable fortress and they have dragons? Damn.
That brings up a really good point, Aziz. When Elissa Farman stole the eggs and Jaehaerys is talking to Barth about it, he literally says, supposedly, there could be if those dragons' eggs hatch, there'll be a new Dragon Lord.
Yeah.
Which is really weird. It's like he doesn't even think that you'd have to be a Valyrian. He just thinks that somebody that could hatch a dragon could be a Dragon Lord. And then we have the same idea here with the Lannisters, like, maybe we can be Dragon Lords.
The Lannisters were thinking ahead of themselves there, and I think Jaehaerys was recognizing that there are a lot of people out there with Valyrian heritage, like in Essos, where that eggs were taken, so that some Lyseni, some Valentine, some person could become a Dragon Lord potentially. But the Lannisters, I think, were just dreaming big.
They wanted a marriage, which might be.
Then they could get their blood.
Then they would actually have the blood. Yeah,
I think they were smarter, I guess.
I'm reminded of the Slavers, right? They clearly didn't have the blood for Drogon, but they were totally willing to make this trade, and they just assumed they could tame Drogon and and get him to do what they wanted. But a dragon is not a slave.
Somebody pointed out that my Viking horns are making a lovely crescent moon in front of the sun. So I'm actually doing a little bit of an eclipse thing, and now they're warning me not to cause any long nights. But fortunately, there's no red swords. No, oh my goodness, this looks like trouble. Wait, right through the middle. All right.
Okay, so I'd say we're probably this is about halfway through. We started a little late, so we'll call this the halfway. Thanks again to patrons who support the show, the guys who we normally introduce at the beginning because of our false start there, we'll do now. Okay. So that includes our dragon riders. That would be Telenis the Talon, King of Gagossos, Rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black.
Looks like LML's little dragon.
He kind of is. Yeah, that is a good description of what he's got going there. Robert IV of House Ardeacor is Burned King of Blazewater Bay, rider of Atraxis, a black dragon with bioluminescent spots like smoldering embers and a banded blue tail. Also, thanks to our Blood Riders, we have Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian Steel Arak with a Dragonbone hilt, Koholkoi, called Sun Piercer, wielder of a Dragonbone bow, and Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the Wildfire Whip Gehenna. Koholkoi has her boss suffered a tragic accident and died, but before that death, he mysteriously had changed his will to put all of his lands and titles into Koholkoi's name, and now Lord Jared's 7 sons and wife are petitioning for justice, but all they're gonna get is the Dragonbone bow right in the face.
I see.
Yes, it's a tough world out there. Also, thanks to our Ironborn captains. That would include, where did they go? They're hiding from me here.
They are.
The Ironborn are good that way. You never know they're there until the last second. Kathleen the Ruthless, captain of the Night Terror. Motto, don't fall asleep. Black Matos Stormrider, captain of the Rusted Hinge. Tusk Shield, breaker, captain of Kraken's Fury. Oisan the Wanderer, captain of Naga's Living Flame. Sir Selvus Redblade of White Harbor, captain of Trident of the North. Lord Chucklaws, captain of the Droman Nightblood, destroyer of evil. Heron Burntbeard, captain of the Smoking Narwhal. John Gregor, captain of the Fist of the Drowned God. Carries Farwind, called Seal Speaker, Oracle of Lonely Light, the Eyes in the Waves. Sir Kieran of Lonely Light. Scourge of the Sunset Sea, captain of Naga's Breath, a Droman armed with siphons of wildfire. Aileen, Archer Queen, captain of the Border Collie. Crimson Kate, captain of the Drowned Queen's Vengeance. Jasana the Just, collector of tolls, captain of the Golden Gift. And Lord Mitch of House Bailey, captain of Widow's Blood. His heir is Lordling Mason of House Bailey. All right. Thanks again to everybody for supporting us there. And also, if you are a follower of ours, our Crusader Kings 2 streams, remember that they're over on Twitch now every other Friday. You can subscribe to us on Twitch and catch the restreams on Westeros History Gaming. That is our new YouTube channel just for the replays of those streams. All right. Back to it.
So guys, I got some bad news.
Oh
about
my
the moon.
God! How did you do that?
Very, very bad news about the moon, guys. It happened. The moon wandered too close to the sun, and now there's a big red sword right through its heart.
Wow!
And I'm not responsible for what happens next.
Somehow the man has a sword on his head. That's quite a balancing act.
I just love symbolism that much. What can I say?
So back to it. The team of Rhaena and the Four-Headed Beast and Dreamfire and Andrew leave Casterly Rock, and Rhaena petitions Jaehaerys for a place they can be where they don't have to deal with this creepiness of, hey, marry me, or just hey, give me your eggs.
Where they can be gay and be ladies.
Yeah, just all they want. And of course, the place to be gay and be ladies is Dragonstone.
Yeah.
Right? that fun-filled, it's a party atmosphere at Dragonstone with all the gargoyles and the blood and fire. So Jaehaerys says sure, and also says sure to Rhaena's request to have Arya come there as well. Arya is a good bit younger than the members of the Four-Headed Beast, but she does kind of bond with Elissa Farman a bit because they have kind of a similar adventurous spirit. This is a 3-year stay in Dragonstone before Elissa finally leaves. You gotta figure Elissa was really not such a big fan of this. She obviously was happy being around her friends, I would think, but she couldn't sail. Not only could she not sail at all, but she couldn't sail in her familiar western seas, which she grew up doing more than she walked, as we're told. So that probably was rough for her.
You know what's really interesting is it's almost like a dragon that's like kept in too small of a place that just like can't stand it.
Very true. Very
In a
true.
way.
And
Black-eyed Lily with a quick super chat. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Black-eyed Lily.
oh yes, thank you, Black-eyed Lily. Thank you very much. We also have around this time is when the Sea Snake was born, and the Sea Snake is going to be heavily influenced by Elissa Farman's adventure and her shipbuilding, and of course he might be the one to discover her final whereabouts, or at least some clue as to her final whereabouts.
Yeah.
Elissa asks for money to build a ship because she's tired of being at Dragonstone. She's tired of hanging around in these empty, dark halls and not sailing. And she wants money to build a ship. And Rhaena's like, no. Straight up like, no. Rhaena's kind of selfish. She wants all these people to entertain her, to be around her, not really giving much credit to what they want to do with their lives. And that's going to blow up in her face vis-a-vis Elissa and Arya, who both just leave on their own because they're not permitted to leave.
So yeah, that's another thing I was going to mention real quick is the interesting parallel. Like basically her jilted girlfriend sails west and steals dragon eggs from Dragonstone, and her daughter steals Balerion from Dragonstone and goes east.
Yeah,
so it's an interesting parallel.
That's what shows what.
And there's more, by the way. There's a lot more parallels, but we'll talk about that.
Definitely. So Elissa steals these eggs and kind of gets lucky because we have this quote here. All the agents and informers that Rhaego Draz had engaged to hunt down Elissa Farman. She says they immediately try to track her down after about a week of the keepers of the eggs trying to figure out it on their own. Then they have to admit their mistake, and then Rhaena tries to figure it out on her own, but then she has to go to admit it to Jaehaerys, and of course Jaehaerys is not so happy about it. And we have this quote. All the agents and informers that Rhaego Draz had engaged to hunt down Elissa Farman and the stolen dragon eggs were now given a new mission to find Princess Arya and Balerion. So Elissa was greatly helped by... She probably would have been found out. Like, the Iron Throne has a great reach. They would have eventually figured... And Rhaego Draz seemed to be very capable. They would have probably figured out what happened. But she, it's like when if you've ever been lucky enough to be pulled over by a cop for speeding and then have them say, never mind, and speed off after somebody else because some other much greater crime has happened nearby. Well, this is kind of like that, but on a much, much, much bigger scale.
We were talking about colors, I like Marvin Martin, his comment here. He said, has anyone noticed that of all the colors of the dragons, we don't see any purple Valyrian colored ones in particular? I just think that's funny.
Yeah.
But, and of course, LML replied that, we do see copper and bronze, orange kind of.
And there was a purple egg,
not
but
orange,
no
orange.
purple
But yeah,
dragon.
you're right. So anyways.
And we had pink.
purple
We had
egg.
a pink dragon, too.
Yeah, you're right. We do
Well, not
that.
a pink dragon, but yeah, she was
It
pink.
like
Morning was pink,
Yeah, like a pinkish.
Well, and Sunfire had wing membranes that were pink.
You're right.
Yeah,
Golden,
so there was a
pink
few
one
of that,
membranes,
but no purple.
Yeah.
Anyways, I like
It is odd.
Purple's so regal. That's the color of royalty. So like George really could have like used that as symbolism for like.
Purple,
well, I guess that just makes it makes Erogenia that much more unique. Doesn't it?
Good point. So here's where there's a bit of a misconception about the eggs here. So Ashaya,
that we
go ahead
ourselves
and explain this.
also had.
We made the same mistake.
We kind of thought that that she took the eggs that Dreamfire laid because we knew that Dreamfire had a clutch of eggs. But the quote says here, the eggs that Dreamfire had laid on Fair Isle had all hatched once on Dragonstone, and Rhaena Targaryen had made certain that her daughter made their acquaintance. However, we do know that Dreamfire has had 2 other clutches of eggs before this third clutch of eggs. So we know the Fair Isle clutch hatched, so it makes us wonder, well, did those other eggs hatch, those other 2 clutches? I don't know, but Dreamfire is one of the only dragons during this time period that we hear about actually having eggs. So the odds are still that these eggs were Dreamfire's, but it's not for sure.
Yeah.
It's still very possible, and I like the idea that it is Dreamfire's eggs.
There is the whole idea of Dreamfire's eggs and the Dany's eggs connection is the Dany's eggs part, whether these are Dany's eggs, some we're going to get to a little later, but there's definitely not only some misconceptions from that, but also as we're going to see, the marketing materials were a little dishonest about it.
It said specifically the marketing materials did say that you find out the origin of Dany's eggs, but George has specifically said that was misconstrued.
Yeah, he literally wrote, "Please disregard."
Yeah, please disregard.
He's like, that was from
Bantam. I do
Bantam.
think it's very clear that he's trying to make
hint
the
at
reader
it.
hint at it, and not so
Yeah.
not so hinty sometimes. I mean, we specifically have Jaehaerys say some spice monger in Pentos is going to end up with some, very brightly colored stones or whatever he says. And so, I mean, that's a little on the nose, which might make you question it more and think that maybe it isn't those eggs just because of how overt he makes it. But I think he's just trying to cover his bases if we're not going to see that they
Well, let's actually talk more about it since we've gotten into it.
Yeah, hold on. I'm confused. I thought that this was a solved thing. These were Dany's eggs, and we were all no.
It's great. I'm glad you have this opinion because we did a little bit too, and we realized through research, it's not even close to a sure thing. I'm going to tell anyone who wants to do a very thorough reading of this, we're going to hit the high points, but nobody suspects the butterfly, who Shay has already mentioned earlier in this episode. She did a really, really good write-up on all the information here and clears up a lot of the misconceptions because, as we just said, Bantam just made that up. They said the answer to Dany's eggs or Dany's dragons is in this book. That is not true. It might be in there. George is like, do not take that literally. So the marketing materials kind of screwed things up again. That's not the first time it's happened. And of course, like you said, this referenced, like Ashaya just said, some spice monger in Pentos will find himself possessed of 3 very costly stones. Like, right? That's supposed to make us think of Illyrio, obviously. But there's a problem. The eggs didn't go to Pentos. They went to Braavos. How did they go did the Sea Lord sell them to the Pentoshi, to Illyrio? I mean, we could certainly imagine that happened, but it's not a sure thing. It's not an automatic, it's not a slam dunk.
I was thinking about the fact that Dany was at the Sea Lord's palace probably for a time, and that's where that plot sort of came together.
I think there clearly seems like if she was at the Sea Lord's palace, that Illyrio has a connection to the Sea Lord. He has an avenue where they could get these eggs, and I think that who knows what the cost was or what was owed to them by the Sea Lord, or who knows what happened there. But I think that it's very likely that it went straight from the Sea Lord to Illyrio, but it's also possible that there were steps in between for these eggs.
I mean, we have other easy explanations for where Dany's eggs could have come from. I thought they came from the stash that Aerys had, because it's said in the World of Ice and Fire that Aerys had eggs that were fossilized. So it'd be really, really easy for Varys to steal those during Aerys' fall.
They come from the Shadowlands beyond Ashai. The centuries have turned them to stone, but still they gleam bright with beauty.
Yeah, and for people saying that, that's what Illyrio says, but there's 2 things to do with that. One, we shouldn't believe everything Illyrio says at all, which is one major thing. But 2, George himself has changed course on a few things in terms of like Dany going to Ashai, and so it would have been more possible that they were from Ashai if she were going to Ashai.
I agree with that point, and Nobody Expects Butterfly points out something really excellent, which is that if those were eggs stolen by Elissa Farman, Illyrio would say that they were Targaryen dragon eggs. That would be a much better presentation to Daenerys. Say these were your family's eggs.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's you could make an argument for that, but you could also make an argument that he thinks it might complicate things. Okay. Or she might be like, "Who took who stole these eggs?
Stole these eggs from our family?
You're giving me back my property."
Good point. That's a fair counter argument.
In terms of anything, we don't want to say something's a slam dunk if you can make another argument.
And I hate to pull back the curtain, but this is obviously, I don't know that George had the Elissa Farman any of this planned out when he wrote A Game of Thrones. So whatever he's doing, he's backfilling this mystery that he left for himself to fill out as a gardener writer at some point.
And so another extension from all this is if those aren't the eggs Illyrio gave to Dany, then that means the Braavosi have 3 eggs that are unaccounted for. So that creates another loose end. So that's part of why the theory that they are Dany's eggs works, because it's neater for one thing. It ties up more loose ends. But again, that doesn't mean it's the truth.
Okay, so here's another thing. All right, so the eggs are sold for a ship, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what does Dany do with her eggs? Isn't there talk of selling one of her dragons to buy ships?
Yes.
Yep. There is.
Okay, so that's one sort of parallel. I've noticed a lot of parallels that are going between Rhaena and Daenerys, and also Arya and Daenerys.
Yeah.
And I feel like it lends a little bit of credence to the idea that Elissa Farman could be Quaithe, because Quaithe tutoring Daenerys, it's almost like she's seeing Rhaena come again, or her daughter, not her daughter, but Arya, who has this connection with Elissa, because she was like, take me away, save me, and she didn't. And here she has this opportunity to save Dany, and Dany's 13 when Quaithe meets her,
Hmm.
and which is only a year older than Arya.
That's a
And
good point.
Arya rides Balerion on a black dragon, just like Dany rides Drogon. So there's a lot of parallels there.
Well, let's talk about that now that we're getting into it. That's something else we were going to talk about at the end, but it doesn't really matter if we talk about it then or now. So what are some other little parallels there? That's definitely one. This kind of sort of, I wanted to talk about parallels with Elissa to characters like Arya and Asha as well, because I don't think there's a strict, strong one-to-one relationship. Like if I were to do like a parallel lives thing for Elissa, I don't think there's any really strong one-to-one comparison there. You can certainly find some, but there's no as far yet. I haven't seen one that's like a slam dunk. So let's just talk about that now.
So, well, the basics. First of all, this is Painkiller Jane's thing about Quaithe and Elissa. So there's only just a couple of clues, but basically the end of the Elissa story is that she, somebody sees a boat in Ashai, Sea Snake sees a boat in Ashai that could be, he thinks it's Sun Chaser. So, either Elissa got there or, her crew got the boat there or who knows what. So
she could have gotten there and also died at the point that he sees Sun Chaser there.
That's the Magellan theory, actually.
Which is also to be. I'm saying she could have died before she got there.
Yeah.
She could have gotten there and died there. But either way, the ship is
either
there.
One. Yeah.
Whether she made it there or not.
And let me just also say real quick before you continue with this theory, I am fully I like, you could maybe say Corlys had some wishful thinking and seeing that ship and believing it was her because she was kind of a hero to him. But it's said that he studied the design of the Sun Chaser, and the Sun Chaser is an exceptionally unique ship. And he's a guy that builds ships his whole life. He would not casually make this mistake. I think he's like an expert on this. So
I agree.
It's hard to disagree with him.
Very good point. I'm glad you pointed that out. I totally take it the same way. We're meant to take Corlys at his word, pretty much. So here's the idea. So Quaithe is telling Dany to go, to go north, you must go south. To reach the light, you must touch the shadow. To go west, you must go east. And Elissa Farman goes west to go east. So it's kind of funny. It's almost like she's telling her to give her this, telling her to follow the same advice. But obviously the story would be that Elissa Farman, who, was responsible for putting these 3 dragon's eggs out into the world, which might be the ones that Dany received, somehow became Quaithe, extended her life. She's a Shadowbinder now, whatever. And so her life, basically start to finish, has been around Targaryens and dragons. And there's a lot of sort of thematic symmetry that evolves, like I said, with the fact that she put the eggs out into play that might be Dany's, and then she comes back to help Dany wake them. When she sees Dany, she'd be seeing an echo of Arya potentially, or Rhaena. Go ahead.
So in this case, though, like you were saying with the origin of the dragon eggs, you're thinking that George wrote Quaithe not knowing who the character was, and then solved the mystery later, which is something that he does. I don't argue with that being. It's 100% something that he would do. That he would write something and not know what the backstory is.
He would have a seed for it.
You're saying that he made I'm saying maybe he wrote Quaithe knowing this is a long lost lover of a Targaryen.
That's what he had with Three-Eyed Crow. He's like, this is a Targaryen bastard, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
and then
with Quaithe,
he became Bloodraven.
This is someone who loved Targaryens. Whatever. He could have known that little bit of a seed there.
Maybe that this was a descendant from a Westerosi. Or
he could have been it doesn't matter who her backstory is. And
Nine Nichols in the chat is pointing out that Quaithe's eyes were wet and shiny a couple of times, which could be tears, and that could fit with this idea that she's seeing an echo of either Arya or Rhaena or a bit of both. And you think of Barristan when he looks at Daenerys and sees a bit of his old love, Lynesse. It could be a similar type of idea. So
right on. I definitely tried to explore that eye color thing. I looked real quickly, but we don't know what Quaithe's eye color is. We know Alyssa's, but yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. Let's go into
that super chat.
We got a super chat. I put in a document right here, Aziz, from Bulwer Purple.
Oh, Bulwer the Purple.
They're loving this.
Okay, well, thank you, Bulwer the Purple.
I will say, in terms of the theories about Elissa Farman, there's definitely been some that had to do with Melisandre as well.
That's true.
Maybe some that thought that, but some people that thought that was Melisandre was her daughter.
Yeah,
is the more realistic one.
It's important to point out that all the theories around Melisandre generally include or at least have to include the fact that she's probably not literally from Asshai, because as we know, there are kids there. So she probably, like everyone else, migrated there or was enslaved and taken there. Even more likely, perhaps.
She's from Ashaya, like I'm from California.
So if we were to compare her, let's make a few other of these comparisons since we're doing this now. Arya is one person that there's some comparison to. You get to kind of like the tomboyishness, the living a life that's generally supposed to be a man's life, that kind of thing. You've got the going overseas. You've got the going under an assumed name. You've got stuff like that. But I don't know, that's not really that strong of a connection. There's definitely some surface level comparisons, but I don't know that. Yeah, like Arya on TV talks about sailing west, but Arya in the books does not. I'm not aware of any reference to Arya talking about sailing to the west or anything like that. So, did you guys have any takes on an Arya Elissa comparison, or is that just kind of?
Well, in the show, there's a weird line where isn't there a line about Arya sailing west? It's not in the books, though.
She asked,
correct.
She's like, "Well, what's west of Westeros?"
Yes.
She's like very curious about that. We have, this motif, Arya of Arya on ships sailing and doing things like that. So the idea that she's comfortable with ships enough that she could sail. I think some people, have this hope that Arya will not die and that she will survive and do that. This maybe their one little like, please. But I don't think it's very likely. It's more likely in the show, I guess. But I can't not see Arya dying.
Yeah, maybe they got that. Maybe the showrunners got that from George. You never know, but they could have just thrown that in there on their own. What do you think,
But
Eleanor?
if you think, well, there's a Stark who did this, of course, Brandon the Shipwright, who sailed west. And I mean, if there's one character who would do this, it's Arya, who's just like, I can't fit back into society. I've become a faceless man. I'm just going to sail east. Also, there's some Reepicheep vibes from Arya too. And Reepicheep, of course, Reepicheep from Narnia. Okay. And of course, Reepicheep is the mouse in the story of Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which Martin is absolutely calling out to here. And that's basically the book where they sail west to the end of the world. And the one who doesn't want to go back is Reepicheep. And he crosses over this like waterfall barrier and doesn't come back with anyone else. And so Arya definitely being a mouse in Harrenhal and stuff like that. I bet if I go and look back, there's more Reepicheep. Now that I think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So.
Okay, that's cool. I like it. In fact, another meta question here from Koakoi. Will we hear about Elissa in The Winds of Winter or A Dream of Spring? That's something that relates to parallel characters, because if she does pop up, it would probably be in an Asha chapter or an Arya chapter or maybe a Tyrion chapter. And so Tyrion, of course, there's not parallels to
I can always see it
her.
in Sam. Also, I have to say.
Sam? Okay, good point.
She just
Sam,
reads so much, and he's in Old Town, and she had all this interaction with the High Tower.
Very good point. That's a very good point. In Asha's case, of course, if Asha could be in a similar situation where she's...
Oh, dude. Nina Friel is on fire here in the chat. She says, Elissa sails with a Eustace, just as the Dawn Treader crew did.
Oh, yeah.
Score, dude. Yeah, see, it is there.
She shoots, she scores.
Is there
3 points for
anywhere? That's what we need to know.
And also, she points out Dawn Treader, Sun Chaser. They're similar names.
Dawn Treader, Sun. Yes, you're right. That's really good. So with Asha, I don't know, maybe she could be... If she lives through everything, maybe she could decide to do some exploring or sailing far.
She's got more sailing expertise than Arya, so yeah.
By miles and miles, yes. And so that could be a possibility.
Put them on a ship and ship them both when she's old enough. Why not?
One of them has to be pretty gay for this parallel to work, I think. Just saying. And hey, we even have Asha in the show. Yara is very gay.
And we hear of Lord Donnell, who is, when his son Eustace returns from the journey we're going to describe shortly, he immediately has like a whole team of scribes recording all of his son's word or grandson's words, and then he sends this thing all over. He immediately sends these messages everywhere. So like
entertain the small folk
Yeah.
with this tale.
But I think you're right. And I think that's a good clue that we are going to hear about it, because he's explicitly tells us that this news was immediately spread all over Westeros. And people would be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, wow, that's just a really cool story.
Yeah, I would definitely. I expect, whatever mention we get, I do expect will just be on the level of the Nymeria references we've gotten, where someone thinks about this big travel journey that someone did. We get a line about it. It's not much more than that.
That makes sense.
But maybe we're lucky and someone is reading something. They see like a book title that has like it's a book about that journey, and they don't read the book, but we see that the book's there. Stuff like that.
So full comparisons to Quaithe. I think we did a pretty good job of covering some of the basics of comparing Elissa to Quaithe, but there's certainly more to that. But that's going to come some other time. Yeah, there's definitely some there.
Because Euron wants to steal a dragon. She stole dragon eggs.
Yeah.
She goes to Ashai. Euron claims to have been to Ashai. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else there, but
you're right. There might be some more. There might be some. Maybe she's like good Euron.
Yeah, good Euron. There you go.
But I want to compare her to Amelia Earhart, which we mentioned briefly earlier, who, of course, she flew west and was never seen again. And, of course, she's a female explorer, very popular. Her story captured the imagination of the entire world at the time. Super brave, super talented, just lots of parallels that just strike just straightforward. Like, once you hear that comparison, it's like, yeah, that's really good. Maybe a lesser comparison would be Magellan. We brought him up briefly earlier. Magellan, totally different kind of guy than Elissa Farman. Magellan was hyper religious, like zealot, believed that God was like backing him in his mission, and he died like being a fighter man, brave, like face his enemies, let his men run away while he stands and fights, kind of thing.
Sounds like very different right there, but I will say she was definitely like a believer in the fact that there was land mass there, and she was very
she would not be told otherwise.
Yeah, in that sense.
You're right. That's a good little comparison as well, for sure. So
we have a super chat here from Prince Ascanius. It seems odd the Valyrian/Dragon Rider eye color isn't found in dragons themselves, which is the purple dragon thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Interesting point.
It is interesting.
I never compared dragon eyes to people eyes. That's a really good...
he was more saying that the dragon's skin color.
Oh, their skin color.
In terms of, we really don't know much about the dragon eye color.
A lot of times their eyes are just described, I think it's just black or something, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, the eyes are usually some sort of fiery color. It's either molten yellow, molten orange, molten gold, or molten red.
Oh, okay.
One of those things.
Molten purple.
I'm probably just thinking more of the TV show, although we see the one blue eyes, and anyway, that's a whole nother topic. Okay, so
that dragon was dead, so maybe that's why its eyes were dark like that.
That is a good point.
So are we going to go over this actual travel?
Yeah, let's talk about the building of the ship, and then we can do the actual travel.
Okay.
We'll go a little over.
I'm most excited.
Yeah, we'll go a little over the 2 hours this time, because we're not.
We had a good 10 minutes, 5 minutes of just. I don't know what Elima was saying. He could have been saying some terrible things about us. We would have no idea.
It was bad. No, it was bad. It was bad.
Okay, so this is
backing up the bus. It was like.
So she goes to the building of the ship is a bit of a saga itself. She escapes Dragonstone and goes to Pentos. And that's when she changes her name to Alice Westhill, which is apparently it's said in the book that it's a bastard name of her own devising. The Hill is of course the bastard name for the West, and it's like
Tyrion when
West
he renames himself, he does Hugo Hill.
Yeah, so that's kind of a comparison there too. Yeah,
yeah, it is definitely,
especially because it's Pentos in both these cases too.
Yeah.
But she goes overland to Bravos, which we're going to give a couple shout outs to Adam Whitehead here. Adam Whitehead, who
of his Atlas of Ice and Fire blog.
Yes, which we are patrons of. He is I would say an elder statesman of the fandom. I don't mean that literally like he's an old guy. I think I'm older than him. But he has been around the fandom since the beginning. That's what I mean by that. So his work is excellent, and so we're going to be referring to it somewhat here, and this is the first time. He points out, or reminds us rather, that the overland route from Pentos to Bravos is dangerous. You got to go through some high mountains. It's probably a little bit like crossing into the Vale. That kind of reminds me of that. Maybe not quite so bad, but yeah, there. See, just all of it, all in there. Just go up this around here, and
You gotta go up, through Andalos.
The Velvet Hills, I think it is. Is that right?
Indeed,
yeah,
the
Velvet Hills. And it's very mountainous.
And the hills of Norvos. Anyways, you guys can't see much, but it helped me.
Yeah, so that's really interesting for that choice of naming there. So she sells the 3 eggs, which we know is a huge amount of money she can get from that, given what we saw from Daenerys and all the different prices thrown around, like rough exchange rates
like,
she could get.
Honestly, she could probably, if she had just taken 1 egg, that would have been the 1 egg for sale, and she could have sold that and financed her ship.
Yeah, maybe.
Kind of think so, but when you have 3 eggs, then you get, the difference between buying 3 eggs and 1 egg if there's only 1 egg for sale,
Yeah,
I feel like she could have gotten about the same amount for 1 egg.
That is a good point.
If it's the only one for sale.
Yeah, if it's like the only one in the whole world, it's that that's a good point. It's scarcity.
Whatever. She took 3 eggs.
So she sells the 3 eggs, deposits the money with the Iron Bank, and sets to building the ship. Ashaya, please read this quote. It says it's a karak, which she has dreamed of for years, and this is really interesting. There's a lot of subtext here.
Unlike the galleys that slid forth daily from the arsenal of Bravos, she was not oared. This was a vessel meant for deep waters, not bays and covers and inland shallows. 4-masted, she carried as much sails as the swan ships of the Summer Isles, but with a broader beam and deeper hull that would allow her to store sufficient provisions for longer voyages. When one Bravosi asked her if she meant to sail to Yi Ti, Lady Elissa laughed and said, "I may, but not by the route you think."
Okay, so several things about that quote. One, galleys slide daily from the arsenal. They can make a galley in 1 day. They do that. It's not said explicitly that they can make one every day, but they can. That's been said. It's also true of the ancient. It's a comparison to Venice. Venice could do that in the real life. So they can make a galley in a day, and this ship took over a year. So whoa, right? That's a big deal as far as the amount of work and effort that went into the ship. Also, Karak is an ocean-going vessel, and ocean-going vessels are not very common in the real world. Of course, they are.
Werthead called. He said this would be a super Karak.
He called it a super Karak or something like that.
And then Autumn Moon and Lady Meredith, the other high tower ships with her,
regular
Karak, just to show they clearly he did some math and did some, calculations where it seems like this ship was a little bit better than the standard Karak.
Yeah, and as we see during the adventure, the Sun Chaser just massively outpaces the Autumn Moon and the Lady Meredith.
Yes. I'm really curious. See, my question, Lady Meredith, I guess Meredith Hightower is one of my guesses.
Do you have any thoughts on the names there? I know you have thoughts on Autumn Moon as a name.
He's right there. He changed his hair, yes. I know you have thoughts on Autumn Moon, so what about Lady Meredith? I don't think that's as evocative at all. My only guess is that it's just a Hightower lady.
Yeah, I think of he does a lot of variants of the name Mary. And so I was thinking maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't really, I didn't have an obvious clue about that. It seems a little random.
Well, sure. It made me think of some ships like we've had, Columbus ships or whatever, just some expedition ships for some of them are these beautiful evocative names, and some of them are just like the name of a person.
Yeah.
Here's what I will say about that is that you guys probably both know that one of my big theories is that there was 2 moons, just like the Carthian legend says, and that one blew up and that we still have one left. And so we often see this pattern of a king with 2 wives, Aegon the Conqueror, obviously, and it replays all over the place. Rhaegar, Lyanna, and Elia are another good one. So here we have one ship called Sun Chaser, another one called Autumn Moon, and the other one's called Lady Meredith. And Meredith isn't necessarily like a giveaway moon name, but it's a lady at least. So you've got a sun with 2 sort of smaller ships, going alongside. And of course, one of those ships dies. It gets pulled down. Is that the Autumn Moon or Lady Meredith?
It is.
That's Autumn Moon that goes down.
Yes.
Autumn Moon, it figures, right? Because autumn
sinks
makes
into
you
the
think
sea.
of sunset, harvest. It's the thing right before winter. So when the autumn moon goes down, now it's time for winter.
And
so
the moon was
definitely
krakened open, right? It cracked. Kraken.
Oh yeah, it was pulled down by krakens, totally. And then of course, Nissa often.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go on.
Nissa figures often go into the sea after they die, which is a symbolic thing, like Catelyn getting tossed into the Green Fork. Dany does her whole thing in the Dothraki Sea. And so you have autumn moon getting pulled down into the sea. Go ahead.
What I think is interesting is that autumn moon gets pulled down under the sea on the third storm. That they specifically talk about,
yes.
you know, I mean, this quote I put in here is like exactly something, because I was like, LML must be having a field day with this. I'll read the quote just because it's very evocative, but like,
Please,
I just
read it.
The wind finally returned one day near sunset when the sky turned red as blood, but the look of it set men to muttering. I told them it boded well for us, but I lied. Before morning, the stars were gone and the wind began to howl, and then the ocean rose. That was the first storm, Sir Eustace said. Another followed 2 days later, and then a third, each worse than the one before. And the third one is the one that, you know, a wave or a kraken or whatever takes the autumn moon down.
Yeah.
But it's
and
the
the
third
lightning
storm.
Also, yeah.
And the lightning and the fire, and anyways.
Storm god and the drown god, all
yeah,
at
we have
once.
this red sky, you know, sky red as blood, and these three storms.
Well, so when the sky is filled with blood, you could also think about that as being filled with bleeding stars, especially when it says the stars are gone. So the stars either fell out of the sky or now they're obscured by smoke. Those are the two ways you can read that. But yeah, it's definitely long night imagery. And then it's just built up to the third one. And it gives you your three forgings of Lightbringer type deal. And yeah, that's awesome.
Horn blasts and all that. Yeah, anyway, it's very evocative.
Threes and
of all
sevens.
That. Very creepy.
It's all there.
So we're still here, and we haven't actually gotten to that, but I still had to bring it up.
Yeah, well, it's fine. We're jumping around is all good. So let me say, let's cover a few more pieces of ground here.
Let me just say, I am not in a hurry. I can't think of anything else tonight that I want to do at all. Not even anything. I can't think of anything on TV that I want to watch at all. So
yeah, we won't rush. We'll get through
take our time. I see lots of people in the chat encouraging us to take our time. So
yeah, no, we're not gonna. This is too fun of a story, too good of a story for us to skip. We're not gonna. Yeah, we'll if we take an extra half hour, then that's cool. Extra fun for everybody listening and watching. Okay, so I want to say a little more about Carax real quick. If you look at the geography we're faced with here, with Westeros and Essos being as close as they are to each other, there's just not a lot of need for ocean-going vessels. You could sail all the way around Westeros and just hug the shore. And this comes up. The Ironborn don't even delve into ocean-going vessels that much, and they're a sailing culture. Same with the Red Wine fleet. Same with Alan Oaken or the Valyrian fleets and all that. They mostly just dealt with ships that could handle the narrow sea and hugging coasts. And that's even true if you go to Essos, because people could just go from port to port by hugging the coast. The only time you go ocean-going vessels, or you need to have an ocean-going vessel, if you're going to cross an ocean. And the people of Westeros and Essos have very little reason to do that. Are they going to go to Sothoryos? Well, as we know, there's not a lot of reason to go to Sothoryos. Are they going to go to the Summer Islands? Not very often, no. Now, the Summer Islanders are cited as people who do have ships like this. They're the few who make ships like this on the regular. So, not only are they the exception, we should suspect, as we have reason to suspect, even Eustace says so himself. Sir Eustace says that he thinks the Summer Islanders know a lot more about Sothoryos than they let on. They probably know a lot more about a lot of these things. They probably were aware of these little three dragon islands that Elissa found, and they may already be aware of an east-west passage.
See all of this in the Long Night prequel show.
Yes, the Summer Islanders these fools think that these fools are like, man, what's the West of Westeros? They're like, we've been knowing about that for thousands of years. So I think that's George. There's a little subtext there about the Summer Islanders, like. Yeah. They know what's up. They have been doing this for a lot longer.
We have a lot to say about the little islands when we get there. I'm excited.
So that's what I have to say about Carax. That's really interesting. So there is a lack of ocean-going vessels in both Westeros and Essos, and it makes sense that. So that would also explain why maybe it took them so long to make this ship. Not only is it a big, fancy, expensive, badass ship, but it's not exactly their main area of expertise. Okay.
Yeah, because you can do so much just by applying the narrow sea. And it's going to Old Town and back. Like, you can do a lot of trade. Yeah. And then if you want to go any further, you've got to go around Valyria and go down to Slaver's Bay or something. It's like, well, that's a whole different enterprise, isn't it? Yeah. So it's really, Euron supposedly sailed all over in the Silence. Well, and when Sea Snake went to, I'm sorry. And when Sea Snake went to Karth, it was like a big deal. That's all I was trying to say. Yeah, absolutely. And we're told that he designed the Sea Snake based on what he knew about Sunchaser, which, by the way, is an interesting subtopic. How did he learn about the design of Sunchaser? Did he get it from, was there like blueprints at Bravos? The Shipwrights. Yeah, he must have visited the Shipwrights. Yeah.
So
he would have been in touch with all the top shipwrights in the industry, being the Lord of the Tides and the Lord of Driftmark and the Narrow Sea. I'm sure he's connected.
Yeah, that's a good point. However, that
They
information was there. It got to him one way or the other.
They all see each other at Starry Wisdom Church anyway. So,
so the Sea Lord, again, she gets a little bit lucky. She has like friends in the right places. Sea Lord comes to her and is like, "Hey, you better get going. You better get on your ship and get out of here. They're hunting you. They know about the eggs." And we don't want Targaryens and their dragons coming here. We Bravosi don't like that. So she goes. Of course, it's funny that the dragons don't actually ever come to Bravos. They get Barth, who's famously known for riding a donkey. So instead of a Targaryen on a dragon, they get a Septon on a donkey. So not quite so scary. That's one thing we probably will have to cut from this episode. I wanted to talk about Barth's negotiation with the Sea Lord, but that doesn't have to be part of this. We can talk about that some other time. It is fun, but yeah, but we are a little behind. Super chat from Toby Moss. Love you guys almost as much as Stannis. Well, we can't measure up to Stannis, so that is high praise. Thank you very much. So she makes a few stops in Sunchaser before she gets underway. She goes to Estermont, or passes by Estermont, which is mentioned as kind of a funny little coincidence because Rhaena is there. So that's
with Larissa.
Exactly. Then she stops at Penthouse for supplies, which is where she had just been about a year before, during her sneaking over there. Then she stops at Tyrosh to hire crossbowmen because she's wary of passing through the stepstones without protection because there's lots of pirates there. Now this is interesting because at this time it's not mentioned during Alyssa's chapters, but it is mentioned elsewhere that during this time Pentos and Tyrosh are at war. So she sailed from one to the other. That probably wasn't just as simple as just sailing from one place to the other. And then hiring crossbowmen during a time of when the city's already at war, that might have been difficult too. But as we know, she had mad money, so it probably wasn't a big problem. Then she stops at Lys to discharge the mercenaries and get water, which is a little bit out of the way, but hey, no biggie. And then she goes to Old Town where she ends up chilling for a while. This is where it's dangerous because she could easily get discovered. She knows she's hiding. She's got this special ship. It's going to be the talk of the town because like people are going to be like, "Whoa, look at that thing!" And this whole pseudonym she has is not necessarily going to hold up.
Yeah, we all know how many rich female sailors there are.
just all over the place.
I'm Alice Westhill. I got these dragon eggs from, well, never mind.
No, it's not the Sun Chaser. It's the Fun Spacer. That's the name of my ship, yeah. So in Old Town, we learn a few little sailing stories here. We hear about mariners from the Iron Islands discovering Lonely Light. We get that story, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Kind of, I've always wondered about the Farmans and the Far Winds and this island, and I've always just wondered if they had a connection between them. And I think it's interesting that they brought them up right there. It still didn't really answer my question. I don't really think they do, but mainly my question is because the Far Winds have skin changing abilities. It seems very clear.
Yes.
So my question is whether the Farmen do as well. I guess.
Well, and we know that they obviously got that from the descendants of Brandon the Shipwright.
Yeah.
Some of whose skin changer bastard son, got marooned on Farwind Isle, and then when the Farwinds got there, I don't know how else.
Yeah. So anyways, but basically, I guess I just want Elissa Farman to also have some skin changing abilities, a little more comparison with Arya.
So a couple other things. Yeah, we want to talk about Brandon the Shipwright, who had the same kind of dream, and compare the two here.
I saw someone in the chat a while. I forget where it was. The chat. Someone was saying that they shipped Brandon the Shipwright and Elissa Farman's descendants together.
Yeah,
they're obviously very.
We got a question about that actually.
Maybe that's where I saw it. Anyway, it racked me up, especially the ship.
That's what I was kind of alluding to, yeah.
So this is along with the same. This is relevant to the story about the Farwinds because during this time where Elissa is at Old Town getting crew and more supplies, we get these stories about other explorations and discoveries like that. And the Maesters, we get a way in from the Maesters and the Maesters, the Freehold of Valyria, Karth, Yeti, Lang, all of their histories and lore believe the world is round. And Elissa, of course, agrees with them, but she thinks that
I love, by the way, the line in the book. They're like, then George is like, then as now, ignorant small folk believe, which is just like him getting against those flat earthers.
Well, he also is like, well, obviously the sun and the moon are round, so it stands to reason that the Earth must be round. It's again like, hello guys, it's not that hard to figure out.
The Earth and the sun and moon are round also is such a great line. Like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, why don't you just point at that? But Elissa agrees with the Maesters that the world is round, but she has this great quote here that it's more than they think. She says, do you want to read this quote, Ashaya?
Sure. The world was far larger and far stranger than the Maesters imagined. Not for her the merchant's dream of reaching Ulthos and Asshai by sailing west. Hers was a bolder vision. Between Westeros and the far eastern shores of Essos and Ulthos, she believed, lay other lands and other seas waiting to be discovered. Another Essos, another Sothorios, another Westeros.
We don't need another Sothorios.
Yeah, I don't know about another Sothorios, it's true.
One's enough. But it's interesting that Ulthos gets mentioned a few times, because obviously Ulthos was added with the lands of Ice and Fire, and has never been mentioned before in the books really at all. And you wonder about that continent, because if she's talking about reaching there to trade, that must mean there's trading spots there. And David, this is relevant to the migration we talked about from Asshai in the Great Empire of the Dawn. Obviously, this is pretty off topic, so I'll keep it brief. But people were migrating in many directions.
I'm going to get into migrating stuff during the islands talk.
Oh, okay, cool.
Stuff there, but anyways. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll just finish this thought then. If people migrated, were fleeing Asshai and the Long Night, some of them obviously went west over the Bones Mountains. Some of them went east to places we've never even heard of yet. And some of them may have gone south to Ulthos, because Ulthos isn't that far away. That would make sense anyway. Well, let's talk about Brandon the Shipwright for now and come back to that.
Who's Brandon the Shipwright, whose descendants are now the Yellow Emperor in Carcosa or whatever it is.
Yes, the Starks.
That's what happened to him.
The Starks of the ET. So Brandon the Shipwright had the same dream of sailing west.
By the way, I just want to point out people in the chat, like Joe Magician, Pablo Avasturgi. Anyways, how do you say it? But they're saying Australthos, Americos, Atlantisthos, Poisonos. I just like everyone name your own.
Name your own continent.
So I have continent. Let's all do that and come back next week with some really great names.
Continos. Tectonos.
We come from the Mooninos.
Marzos. Marthos.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Marzos. Marzos. MCRN.
So there's several differences with Brandon's situation and Elissa's, although the general idea of sailing west is the same. But there's some pretty significant differences too. First of all, he had a whole fleet. Second of all, he was king in the north. So he orders people to go with him, and they're going with him. Elissa just has to pay people and convince them. Second of all, no chance thousands of years ago that the North had shipbuilders that could make these carracks.
Yeah, they didn't have technology.
I just don't think. I think that they likely had far weaker ships.
He was ahead of his time.
Yeah. So.
And that matters because out of the deep ocean, you're going to get waves that are really big.
Yeah.
And a bigger ship just has a better chance, I think, right?
Yeah. And we see that in action. The Sun Chaser just has a way easier time than the Autumn Moon and the Lady Meredith.
Yeah, and the Autumn Moon and Lady Meredith are meant to be pretty advanced ships.
Yeah, those are high tower ships. That's a sailing town with all the money they need. And yeah, so it both tells you how amazing the Sun Chaser is and just how difficult this journey is. Also, there is this important factor of the difference in sea and climate. Here's another quote. Here we have, they had sailed...
The northern seas?
Yeah, go ahead, Ashaya, you read this quote. Please.
So this is talking about Brandon the Shipwright, obviously, that he sailed the northern seas, where monstrous krakens, sea dragons, and leviathans the size of islands swam through cold, gray waters, and the freezing mists hid floating mountains made of ice. Alice Westhill did not intend to voyage in their wake. She would sail her Sun Chaser on a more southerly course, seeking warm blue waters and the steady winds she believed would carry her across the Sunset Sea. And she's smart because who would go from there?
Now, so yeah, definitely. That's very smart. So yeah, she took the route that's more likely to be used by the Summer Islanders, because that's more on their longitude. If I'm using it, that's longitude, right? Yeah. And also, but we should entertain the possibility that Brandon the Shipwright did make it, because you might say, well, if he made it, why did he never come back? Well, that's where knowledge of how trade winds and things like this come in handy, which I'm not an expert on, but I know that we learn here that from the Lady Meredith's journey, they had a real hard time coming back, and that's because of the way the winds work. So just because they could sail one way, like Lady Alice says, the winds prevail that direction.
People point out, by the way, this person Ron Holler, so she's also notable to compare historical parallel. We have Viking longships made it to continental North America, and stuff like that.
They did that by following the shore, though. Is the only thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, sort of. Once they got to Greenland, though, they had to cross the Atlantic to get to Greenland, and then they followed the shore to find places like.
Right, but it's actually not that far. It's one of those distortions of the flat map thing. It's actually not very far at all.
It's true. It's brave and adventurous, SYF, but
Oh no, I'm not saying it's easy, and it's cold as fuck too. I'm just saying they didn't strike out across the middle, the heart of the ocean.
You're right. That's true. That's a fair point. Let's see here. Although
I'm not any kind of ship expert, so don't.
Me neither. I'm no mariner. So we have a question.
Half the time.
We have a question from Al Iskander, aka Scott Alexander Wortman, who wonders if they could have made it, and if they did, would there be Stark descendants in Essos or elsewhere? Well, the fact that they didn't ever come back, as I said, is not necessarily evidence they didn't make it. I think the evidence is against them making it because of the difficult northern seas, their weaker ships, and the total lack of evidence that anyone survived. But it's possible, and if there are descendants over there, that would be really interesting. I kind of doubt that would come up in the story, but George could give us a little tidbit, like some interesting gray eyes, from some Far Easterners, like that reminds us of the Stark-colored eyes, or something like that. Some sort of subtle reference that could spin the fandom in circles, thinking how that could be a Stark descendant or something like that.
Well, so Cersei, when she tells Ned Stark to go home in the throne room at the climax of the Game of Thrones, she says, "Return to the gray waste you call home." And the gray waste is the name of the, quote, frozen desert that's east of Essos in the far north.
Well, I see the comparison there as being more just showing that this calamity, this long night type thing, has happened at the different hinges of the world, on the Essos side. But it's a good valid thing. But I just want to bring up that I think that's a great quote. In terms of us, talking about the things that are on the ends of the world, the others.
Well, and they also they have shape changers, right, from Mosavi.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a nice little world building bonus that was fun.
I mean, we'll probably never know, but if you want to write the fan fiction about Brandon the Shipwright, creating the legends of the shape changers in the Gray Waste, then
you're saying if you want to write fan fiction about it, you will read it. Mel will be there. He will be beta reading your fan fiction about this. He's committed.
Okay, so let's see here. So while she's sitting around trying to get more people to join her crew and all that, word kind of gets out because, like we said, this is hard to conceal. And so Donald the Delayer, a great name for the Lord of the Hightower, sends two of his grandsons, Eustace and Norman, who we've mentioned. They come down to question her and figure out what the deal is. And here's where another one of her amazing talents comes in: her charisma, her ambition, her vision, and her ability to sell this to other people of somewhat like mind. They, instead of arresting her, they join her, which is just awesome. Yeah. And so they just start raising crews and outfitting their ships instead of arresting her. And finally, word reaches King's Landing. So clearly Donald the Delayer is delaying this news getting out. But eventually it does, and he has to do his thing where he plays both sides. He doesn't want to be like, oh, I was helping them escape, but he also doesn't want to not let them escape because they're his grandsons and all that. So again, luck on her side, and Donald the Delayer on her side. Basically, as right around the time she leaves, finally, Jaehaerys gets word that this is up, and this might be a little bit of telling us about how dragons work, this next bit, because we're told that he wants to go chase her on his dragon. And Alysanne and Barth and others are like, dude, No way. You can't take Vermithor that far out into the open sea. There's nowhere to land, all that stuff. So that's maybe George was kind of giving us a little bit of clue
really
about
would
the
love to
capabilities
see
of dragons.
If Rhaena and Dreamfire had just gone with Elissa and like Dreamfire could land on the ship, you know, and like have landfall, you know. Anyways.
And then just like go up as a scout and look around and try to find.
Exactly. I feel like it would be really useful if they stayed within, you know, some distance of the ship. That the dragon could be really useful.
Problem for that is that you see how much dragons need to eat.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You're
it's not like the dragon's just gonna like
livestock.
burn the waves, you know, burn the ocean, and it'll just dead fish will just rise, and catch them, and they'll just like torch fish. I don't know.
Looks like LML has a take here.
Yeah, I got one for you. I'm just going to read this from the World of Ice and Fire, Beyond the Free Cities. Here's a potential parallel. Talking about Sithorios. And I'll actually back up, since this is a little taster for your Sithorios episode. Not your Sithorios, but your Gagassos. It's so it says, colonies planted here wither and die. Only Zamatar endured for more than a generation. And today, even that once great city is a haunted ruin, slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. Slavers, traders, and treasure hunters have visited Sithorios over the centuries, but only the boldest ever venture far from the coastal garrisons and enclaves to explore the mysteries of the continent's vast interior. Those that dare, more often than not, set forth into the green, never to be seen again. We do not even know the true size of Sithorios. Carthene maps once showed it as an island, twice the size of Great Morak, but their trading ships, venturing farther and farther down the eastern coasts, were never able to find the bottom of it. Giscari, who settled Zamatar and Gorosh, believed Sithorios to be as large as Westeros. Genera Baleares flew her dragon, Terax, farther south than any man or woman had ever gone before, seeking the boiling seas and steaming rivers of legend, but found only endless green jungle, deserts, and mountains. She returned to the Freehold after 3 years to declare that Sithorios was as large as Essos, a land without end. So I just thought that was kind of
3 years is about how long it took as well for Lady Meredith to return. FYI.
Good point.
It took her as long 3 years to explore Sithorios, and it took Lady Meredith 3 years to go from Old Town all the way, you know, all of that whole journey
to those 3 islands, and then all the way to
Sithorios, then to Summer Islands, you know, to all Trees Town. Anyways, it took them 3 years to do all of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's a good catch. I didn't. The 3 years both ways. That's neat. So okay, here's a.
The point you were making is that on a dragon trying to fly west has nowhere to land, of course, and
nowhere to land.
Even though Sithorios is dangerous, you can land here and there real quickly and
catch
hopefully
a nap,
don't get
a snack.
Worm parasites. Or
Exactly. That's the biggest danger. Maybe one of the biggest dangers.
One of them.
Okay. Velociraptors and
a couple more questions here. Another one from Marvin Martian. Could the dreams Elissa had just be an adventurous spirit, or sent by some of the Lovecraftian entities or gods or magicians hinted at in this saga? That's a question that I love that question. First of all, this is something that dates back to the origins of human societies. Like, people have long believed that dreams were sent by gods or other beings, and Lovecraft loves riffing on that. He loves having, like, when Cthulhu rose from the sea, the most creative people around the world, the sensitive types, had dreams of this. And the protagonist of that story is realizing that people all over the planet were having these dreams at the same time, and it terrifies him, understandably. So could these beings exist in Westeros or in A Song of Ice and Fire? Absolutely. Melisandre even says that, you know, these are the dreams sent by the Great Other. She makes comments that allude to that sort of concept. So I think that is one of those things that we'll never know. But yes, it's entirely possible. LML, I know you've got some takes on that.
Oh yeah, it's obvious. It's Quaithe in the future sending dreams back to her past self as Elissa Farman. Moving along.
Elissa 1 is Elissa 2 brand. They're all the same brand. They're all the same Elissa. Yeah.
But you did make the point that her dream of like cities shining under the sun sounds very cities, like Randall Carter's persistent dream of this golden city that he's always chasing or whatever. So
Randall Carter, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Randolph Carter. Yeah, I've compared him to Euron before.
Randolph. Right. So it does. George is definitely thinking Lovecraft here a little bit. So yeah, it's not it's good tinfoil. I'll say that it's tinfoily, but it's good.
Yeah. Super chat from Richard Tabor. Everything George R. R. Martin, the album Clutch. Big news of long nights. Escaping from characters' personal prison planets, maybe while enjoying some space grass along the way. So Space Grass, Big News, and Prison Planet are songs by the band Clutch, who are my favorite lyricists of all bands. They have fantastic lyrics. Clutch, I've seen Clutch live maybe just under 30 times. No lie. I am not exaggerating. So, I love to see someone refer to Clutch. I assume Richard knows that I'm a Clutch fan, or that would be a little random. But anyway, I recommend this band, Clutch. They have amazing lyrics. They're like used to be like a stoner rock band. Now they're kind of a blues rock band. Okay, so let's talk about the actual journey. You've seen them too, huh?
Yeah, well, with Deftones a couple times back in the day, a long time ago when Deftones was young. But continue on.
Very nice. Okay, so the 3 ships, Sun Chaser, Autumn Moon, and Lady Meredith. This is one of the things we were waiting for. We're talking about we've talked about parts of the actual journey before, but now we're going to really focus on it. LML, tell us about these names, these ship names. You've touched on it somewhat, but let's focus on it a little more now.
Well, I mean, I've said what I have to say about it as far as the symbolism goes.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool. I thought maybe there was a little more. All right, then. Well, then let's move past that then.
No, the main the way I see it is with the sun and 2 moons pattern, because the autumn moon is the one that makes you think of like fire and sunset and bringing on the long night. So that would be the one I associate with Nissa, the moon that already blew up in the past. And Lady Meredith would be associated with essentially the ice moon. So what does it say about Lady Meredith? What's the description of her when she comes back to shore? Read that to me, and you might find a clue.
Where is that?
Lady Meredith when she comes back to shore.
I mean, the high towers in general tend towards like icy symbolism because of all the White Tower and the Gerald Hightower being a knight of the Kingsguard who have snow white armor and all that stuff. But I would suspect that Lady Meredith has some clue about ice symbolism somewhere. But she came back pretty bedraggled, right?
Yes, she's the one that was rammed by
by a huge white Leviathan,
a Moby Dick
type
parallel,
thing. Which we're gonna get into.
Clearly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's like your white sea dragon.
Yeah. So they have that quote about how they are attacked by. Well, they encounter a pod of leviathans, but one of them, which is this huge white bull, larger than a ship, it's quoted as, slams into Lady Meredith and cracks the hull, and so yeah, that clearly is evocative of Moby Dick, and which is inspired by the sinking of the Essex, and just the idea of these whales attacking ships.
Yeah, he had to throw some Herman Melville in there, I guess.
But yeah, they have other attacks too. I mean, obviously we talked about the maybe kraken. It says to a man they were convinced they had seen a giant kraken pull Autumn Moon beneath the sea. Is what Eustace says, but we're still clearly meant to doubt that based
Eustace
on the
himself
writing.
doesn't think
he doesn't think so. Yeah, it says that's all he says. That's all it was, a wave, a monster of a wave. But all my men were screaming kraken, kraken, and not a word I said would ever disabuse them.
And this is George's device to get them to turn around,
that's
so
like
we have someone to tell the story.
Here, I think
What's that?
The fans are the men yelling kraken, kraken, and nothing George will say will disabuse us.
I like that take. The meta, the fans are yelling for a kraken. I definitely am yelling for krakens.
That is cool. George is the captain, of course. That's great.
Captain Kraken.
So one thing I will point out is that you just mentioned the white Leviathan that hit the boat was as big as a bull, or is like a bull Leviathan. You said the word bull.
White, a huge white bull. Yeah, it's
that's how it's written.
And this is a high tower ship, so it makes you think of the white bull. Gerald Hightower.
That's hilarious. That's very nice.
Good one. I didn't catch that.
That's very clever.
That's really good. Funny.
That is really very clever.
And so, and the white bull. So this specifically, like Aziz, you probably have heard me talk about this. Ashaya, you maybe haven't, but basically the others the Kingsguard act as symbolic stand-ins for the others. They have snow white armor, ice armor, pale as snow. They're in the moonlight. They're white swords, just like the others have pale swords. And it goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah, their identity is stripped away and all that. Yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. So the fact that this ship is associated with the white bull, that gives you the Kingsguard symbolism of Gerald Hightower, and also the idea of even though he's using Leviathan for a whale here, a Leviathan of the Bible is an actual sea dragon. And every time he talks about Leviathans, or at least a lot of the time, he's slipping you clues about the sea dragon myth, which is
he brings up
another
sea
whole
dragons, at least a couple of times in Fire and Blood, as it so happens.
Yeah.
He
So
specifically talks about Leviathans, sea dragons, krakens, like he lists them all off.
With the brand and the Shipwright thing, that quote, it had a sea dragon quote too.
Yeah.
It was for one of them anyway.
Yeah, he's made more mention of sea dragons, it's for sure.
Well, which is interesting because it makes me think that maybe actually sea dragons are also a real thing. I took it to be mostly a myth that there wasn't an actual sea dragon, but like maybe there are.
Maybe there are. Yeah, he just keeps bringing it up. It's interesting. I think
That would be cool.
Sure. So we can get on. Let's see. So in all of these attacks, we mentioned this Kraken/wave attack. Either way, it was a terrifying thing that happened. But Sun Chaser, it's worth noting, was not around for this. Had gone ahead. And comes back and saves Lady Meredith and like tows her basically
to those 3 islands.
To those 3 islands that we're about to talk about. But the crew of Lady Meredith are terrified. They do not want to go forward because of what they saw. But Sun Chaser didn't see it, and they do go forward.
So they're not spooked by that. They didn't see it. So there's maybe there's a couple that might have been spooked when they landed on the island and started to talk about it. But still, experiencing it and hearing about it, definitely very different.
So we've got these 3 small islands that they land at, which they name Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya. Elissa names them that. So, they're called the Targaryen Islands, which is really funny to me.
They're the Dragon Stones.
Yeah, the Dragon Stones.
It's sort of reinforcing that whole like Solar King and 2 Queens symbolism of the ships when they find 3 islands and name them after the Targaryen triumvirate.
Those 3. So this is the thing that I think is really interesting about these islands is what's there already. We know that there's wild pigs, which makes me wonder if this is at all indicative of the previous human presence on there, which could be Summer Islanders that have stopped there over any long period of time. But we like with our talk about the Great Empire of the Dawn and that this past culture, it makes sense that some past culture that has traveled around like that would have been there.
Yeah, it's unlikely that they literally discovered it.
Yeah,
the first people ever to see it.
Yeah,
like that's very unlikely.
So we have that, but we also have like these large lizards that are described that I thought were really interesting. They're described.
They sound like Komodo dragons, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Because they're described as huge, sluggish gray lizards as big as deer, and they have a venomous bite, which Komodo dragons have.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about like it's really actually very funny to me that the High Tower men and the Lady Meredith, they try to take some of these big lizards on board.
Yeah.
They take 3, also 3 notably, but 3 of the great gray lizards on board, and one bit his steersman, whose leg turned green and had to be removed. So I guess Komodo dragons, but I'm really just picturing like them like trying to like wrestle with these.
Yeah, what were they like? They put leases on them. Like were they like maybe we can eat this while we're out sea?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know what their idea was. Anyways, it amused me. But
I would have been voting. Like, let's bring back a corpse of one.
Yeah, that's hilarious. But see, this other thing I think that really cracked me up when I thought about it was this line from Eustace says, where he talks about, "We have spices here I have never tasted, in these pink fruits. We have our fortunes here in our hands." And so I thought it was kind of fun to think about what pink fruits they don't have in Westeros, or what pink fruits they do have in Westeros, because that could be indicative that some people have made journeys out there since then to import these wild pink fruits. But so in doing some looking through Search of Ice and Fire and all that, grapefruit is mentioned once in the series by Tyrion, who is someone who would have maybe had an interaction with a grapefruit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not mentioned
rich.
as the fruit. He just compares something to a grapefruit. And there's pink grapefruit and stuff like that. But there's also guava or pink, and we don't have any mention of that in the series by that name. And there's other pink fruits. But my pick for what's on the Targaryen Islands are dragon fruit. For obvious reasons, but dragon fruit are like bright pink, and it just, anyways, that's my pick.
That's headcanon, like instant headcanon.
Yes,
like yes, those are dragon fruit. Gotta be.
But yeah, no, there's a ton of other choices as well, and I did a search. Like cranberries and strawberries are mentioned in the series, like in a Search of Ice and Fire.
Strawberries are okay.
Strawberries. There's strawberry pies. There's many mentions of strawberries and cranberry, and pomegranate is mentioned.
I remember pomegranate. Yeah.
So there's mentions of all of those, but again, because this is in the past, you could say that the existence of these fruits in the current series means that people have traveled to these little islands again, potentially, but probably not. But I just want to bring that up as a possibility.
Right on.
But there's no mention of dragon fruit in the whole series.
So before things had gone wrong, the expedition started off great. They had like 12 days of smooth sailing, and then at one point they sort of do a reckoning and realize they're probably farther west than any known Westerosi has ever been, and they celebrate. And this is where it gets a little, Gildane throws out a reference to a real world phrase: "Pride goes before a fall," instead of "Pride goeth before a fall." And they lose wind for like a fortnight. So things are bad for a while, and then they get some bad omens with like maggots in a meat cask, and then we have that whole deal we talked about earlier with the blood red sky. So we don't have to talk about that again. But then, so things were starting to get bad, and then they got progressively worse. You get the bad storm, second worst storm, third storm, and then the crew doesn't want to go any farther.
We have a super chat here though for you to read, Aziz.
Oh, we do? Okay. Yeah. We have a super chat from Chixalub Rob. That is Robert IV Ardeacor. He says, we have air dragons, earth dragons, that's the fireworms, ice dragons, why not sea dragons? That's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, if we have dragons of all types, why not sea dragons? It does. And that's, they make sense. They're already reptilian. They have scales. It fits.
I like Nina's thought as well that it could also mean that the High Towers cultivated them afterwards, that they could take these fruits and the seeds and
then plant
them and not have to go all the way back there. That would be a great source of income, actually. So I think that's a neat idea, for sure.
In fact, we have that as a question here: is there any commerce back and forth between those two places? Like, are there people sailing there to get that fruit and those other stuff?
So they wouldn't need to keep sailing to get the fruit if they could, but who knows if it, like the climate and all that.
That's true.
I don't know about all that and what fruit it is even, but yeah.
So Eustace is quoted as saying that there's no way he can go west, even though Alice is like, what are you talking about? These islands are tiny. It's great that we found this, but this is nothing like what we said we were going to do. We were going to go west, like really to go west. And this is just the beginning. But he's like, nah, no way. My crew saw that other ship go down there, convinced they saw Kraken. Yeah, and it was his brother too.
I think that is off. It can be just glossed over by myself.
No, you're right. That's a huge point.
Like his brother just died in front of him. His whole crew and ship, probably a lot of people he knew and was friends with. And anyways,
so you're right. He's saying his crew doesn't want to go on, but he probably doesn't want to either. He's probably like, he's probably like good captain, bad sailor kind of game there. But no, he didn't want to go. So they go back home. They try to go back home, but as we see here, they missed badly. I mean, they really, really missed badly. Like, they way got off of track. They're like, oh, well, let's go back to the Summer Islands. And they missed the Summer Islands, missed Nath, and got all the way to Sithorios. Yeah. And this is and they start to just die off. They can't fix their ship.
Some of them are disappeared, as happens all the time
all
in Sithorios.
All the various things that we hear can happen on Sithorios, all of them happen to these guys. Disease, strange creatures, and just vanishings in the middle of the night. So it's basically the same stuff we've already heard about Sithorios. And if you want a full treatment of that, check out Nymeria Part 2. It's called 10,000 Ships, but it's really about half the episode is about Sithorios, if not more than half. So we really get deep into all that stuff there.
But they do get going again, and some repairs. They get to the Summer Isles where they were trying to go, where they have lots of ships and shipbuilders. And they go to Tall Trees Town, TTT,
and get their stuff all fixed up. So this is something that reminds me of Sam and the Summer Islanders. He's with Gilly, and they're running. They have to sell the books to the Maesters, or to the Summer Islanders, to pay for their passage. And Sam is really sad because he's like, these books are so important, and we're going to give them to the Maesters. And the Kohoro Mo, is that who says it? Yeah, he's like, don't be silly, man. They're still going to get these books. They're just going to buy them from us instead of you giving them to them. So don't worry about it, man.
Can I tell you like how much better that made me feel to read that? I was like, oh, thank goodness they're still going to get the books. Like, I care so much about books. Like, no, not the books. But can I ask a question? Like, if they landed in Sithorios and they were shooting for Old Town, like they missed by a lot.
They were shooting for the Summer Isles.
Huge amount.
They were trying to get to the Summer Isles.
Well, they're trying to, because that would be
a lot. No, regardless, they missed by a lot.
That would be a landmark for them to,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really bad. And this is why we talked earlier about the Summer Islanders. Like, they probably know more than they let on.
If you look at If you look at Wordheads, who we've cited a few times, his Atlas of Ice and Fire blog, he did a whole post. I mean, he just posted it a couple days ago, actually. It was just in time for this stream as it happens. Anyways, he did, as he does map mock-ups. And he did do, like, a mock-up of the course of the Lady Meredith and what they would have had to do to miscalculate course to miss the Summer Isles. And I have it, like, I won't be able to put it on the screen. Actually, maybe I could quick enough and cite him. But I recommend looking it up if you are interested in this topic, because it's really an interesting blog post. It's all of his stuff is.
So let's see, what else do we have here? LML, do you have any thoughts on this distance issue or Sithorios or the tale as told by Eustace or anything else before we move on?
No, I think we've hit the marks here. I mean, I thought it was interesting from a narrative point of view that they hit this spot where it's like, they reach the islands. What do you want to do now? See, I think if it wasn't for the fact that Elissa Farman was basically wanted in Westeros, the smarter thing would have been to turn back when you reach those 3 islands, go back home, and then try to come back and find those 3 islands again with more provisions and start to build that up as a base, and then use that as a base for further exploration from there. And you could more systematically explore that way, but she was of course wanted, and so that wasn't a choice.
She was just
gonna. I'm gonna put this on the screen for anyone watching who can look at it. You might get just a little glimpse of our cat just knocked me over. But whether you can read this well or not, you can still see the general course of the Summer Isles and how much they had to have really veered off. Honestly, you can see that too, Aziz.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about ancient. They had no way to know where they were. Basically, they don't have like a sextant or
atlasfireblog.com. .wordpress.com.
Huh.
You can.
I pictured those Targaryen islands like a lot further out.
Yeah,
west.
I trust Wordhead. I will say in terms of he says it's south by southwest is what it's quoted as. Anyways, he does his research on the name of his blog is Atlas of Ice and Fire. So. While he's not always
what I don't
perfect,
understand is
trust him generally.
Yeah, sure. I don't understand if they were that close and they wanted to turn around from there. Why wouldn't they sail northeast and go to Old Town? I mean, getting to Sithorios or the Summer
Probably
Islands.
Because of the winds,
It's because of the winds, yeah.
I would assume that they didn't think they could make that journey back. It was a harder journey than the farther journey.
That's what I was saying about real world navigation and about these passages.
Like
you can't always go the same way back and forth.
But yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Aziz?
Yeah, you can't always go the same ways back and forth because of the way the winds work. The winds will blow one way, but they don't like reverse. Half the day. They're just always blowing that way for the most part. So you have to, when you go one way across the ocean, you can't necessarily go the same route back. So I think that's what happened with these guys. They may have tried to go northeast and they couldn't. The winds wouldn't allow them, especially with their ship so damaged. So I think that's a big part of it. Yeah,
there tend to be these little loops and conveyor belts in the currents. So I guess maybe that's how you have to get home. But it just seems weird. Like I pictured them being a lot further away. And so when they're trying to get back to Old Town, like it doesn't quite work, but maybe that's not the implication.
Yeah, I mean, it says, Lady Meredith heads home, but is forced off course by bad weather. So yeah, I think it is, a lot of it is that they tried what you were saying and they failed. And we're like, well, let's try something else rather than keep trying something that we're going to die doing.
It does sound pretty crazy, but if you think about it, a storm will force a ship in a direction that it has zero control over. And if the storm lasts for several days, you can imagine being really, really far off
and
course.
Not knowing where you are, 100% in relation.
Well, you'd use the stars to navigate. So you'd be able to tell if you were like way further south than you're supposed to be.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But these are, as we've said, these are not
and sometimes it'd be
navigators
storming.
They don't navigate by the stars as much.
Sometimes you wouldn't see the stars, and stuff like that, depending on the weather. So yeah, it's
some of these would be unfamiliar
stars.
Drinks and
Knows things says sailing equals difficult. Yes. I agree. They did a lot better than I could have done in this situation.
Definitely.
Joe Magician's like, you do a lot of math on a map and hope it's right, but sometimes you end up in Sithorios.
Whoops. Yeah. So so the Summer Islanders get hired as crew, and this is part of what we hear the story of them returning. People are like, at first they're like, whoa, who are these people? Did they actually find like dark-skinned people to the far west? They look like they are Summer Islanders. Okay. That's cool, but that's not as exciting as we thought. So these guys make mad money off of their hookup with Eustace Hightower because, first of all, he's a Hightower. Second of all, they were desperate. And third of all, they had rich cargo from both these islands and from Cytherea.
What he should have done is marketed his tale and sold the book.
Probably should have. That's what happens when you're already super rich. You're like, just throw that money on the pile.
I'll just give the story out for free.
Yeah. So is that, what do you call that? The Sostorios? Is that the... Is that the Sostorios?
Sostorios, I see, yes.
That's bad. Okay, so of course it's important for George to have written it with someone coming back, or else we would never have any sort of narrator telling us what happens. So that's part of why one ship had to make it back home. But yeah, so Eustace is burned. His eyes are, his face is all wrinkly. He's been malnourished, and of course he's traumatized by the loss of his brother and being in Cytherea and seeing his crew dying all around him. So I don't know that there's much more to say about him and his story. Maybe now we'll move on to the remaining.
Well, hold on. Let's give me the description, because he could be a last hero figure.
Oh, the description of
Eustace Hightower
coming back when like the sun and the moon have both gone. And only he's back. Like, read me his little.
Do you have that quote? I don't think we have it handy.
I'll just word search. If I pull up my Kindle real quick, I can find it.
We're in that. It's harder to look up quotes phase of this new material.
Which is also in that blog post I was talking about, where he worked out some of the distances. He's previously worked out the distance from the west coast of Westeros to Ashai at around 19,000 miles, whereas the distance from Marine to Westeros is around 25,000 miles. So he just looked up, he worked out some interesting figures on one way being faster. Or not faster, shorter. Not faster or shorter distance. Okay. Not necessarily faster in traveling.
Yes, there's always other factors.
But the other thing is that about when Corlys would have seen the Sun Chaser in Ashai would have been, he worked out about 19 to 23 years later.
Right, so, which is important because, that's actually...
For her age, and if she would be alive.
She would not, she's not that much older than Corlys. Like, she's substantially older, but not, like, lifetimes.
No, she wouldn't be dead just
25-ish years older.
Yeah. So maybe she'd be in her 40s and could have had kids, could have had a life, could have had any number of things, or she could just be dead. Yeah. But it isn't, like, a long time that it is very reasonable for her ship to be there with her.
Yeah, and the Sea Snake, this was his second journey. To Ashai. Of his 9 voyages, it was the second one that was to, or maybe it was his third. It was one of the early ones that was to Ashai. So he would have still been in his relatively, young age, considering how long his life was. I would imagine he was in his mid to late 20s.
Yeah. Early.
Yep. Yeah, Wordhead estimates he would have gotten to Ashai somewhere between 75 to 79. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. It's hard to argue with that.
So, anyways, that is just some context. It's worth the read of his stuff about this, for any of his distance and traveling stuff. But we got some super chats here, Aziz.
Okay.
About Fate and Legacy.
From Marvin Martin, I recommend The Fable of the Dragon Tyrant. I assume that is a story. I've never heard of that one, but that sounds cool. Also from Carrie Neves, sailing west of Westeros seems similar to trying to sail uninvited to Tolkien's Aman. Yeah, the lot of their characters sailing west it's basically to join the gods in Lord of the Rings, which is I'm kind of simplifying, but yeah, there's this kind of endless west where the mystery lies, but it's also maybe the lost realm of, I think, is it Valinor, where the elves kind of all migrated to after they left the realms of men. Okay, so a couple other things. Fun question we got here with regards to the eggs, and with her, if Corlys saw, not the eggs, sorry, but Corlys seeing her in Asshai, or seeing her ship, if Corlys saw the ship and she was kind of his hero, you got to figure he may have tried to find her. I mean, he may have looked around, tried to like.
I mean, doesn't it say as much that he could not find the owner?
I don't think it says that.
I thought it did. I'll look it up while you're talking. So I thought it did say that he like could not find the owner of it.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and you'd think he would definitely look, but Asshai is so vast and so empty. You can't just like wander around and be like, "Hey, did you see whose ship that was?"
You just stay at the ship. You just stay. You just
wait there.
Wait there forever. I don't know. That's my only guess on how to do that. But yeah.
Well, LML, what do you think about this question? I think it's a good question. Like, what maybe could have come from this, or what do you think Corlys might have done, or why we don't know more?
Can you rephrase the whole question? I was digging for that quote there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The question is, could Corlys have looked for Elissa, or shouldn't he have looked for her if he saw her ship in Asshai? And we theorize that maybe he tried just because of the vast size of Asshai and the lack of population, meaning like you can't just walk around on the docks and be, hey, like, who owns this ship? You know, there's just...
Yeah, no, I'd say it's pretty hard to get information there in all likelihood. He must not have... I mean, the real answer is George didn't want to give us any more information. So, you can fill in the blanks however you want to.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
I did find some Eustace goodness, though. I said he was going to be a last hero guy, right?
You did.
So you mentioned all the people dying on his ship or watching his companions die or whatever. Yeah. That was the thing that set me off. But check this out here. A little bit later, there came a disease called the Shivers, and it came to Old Town. The great port city of Old Town was especially hard hit, losing a quarter of its population. Eustace Hightower, who had returned alive from Alice Westhill's ill-fated voyage across the Sunset Sea, survived once again, but his wife and children were not as fortunate, nor was his grandsire, Lord of the Hightower. Donald the Delayer could not delay death. He died shivering. So did the High Septon. On and on and on. So... you kind of think of the last hero, like his companions all died when they were north searching, fighting the others or searching for the children of the forest or whatever. So here's this guy, Eustace, and all his family is dying from the shivers. So that might be something.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's definitely a good catch. Also, yeah, I wonder if
keep looking, but
it's kind of crazy that he survived given how much weakened his body probably was. He probably took some permanent damage, but on the other hand, he may have toughened his immune system up or something. Could just be random. Yeah, Nina Friel says that maybe the ship was completely abandoned. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they did look. Maybe they did have people wait at the ship to see if anyone would come back to it, and no one ever did. Maybe they...
Who were the ledgermen of Ashai that would just like have a ship in dock and no one owned it, never looked into it.
They had to sell it to... get food because food is so expensive in Ashai. Yeah. Okay, well, unless there are more questions or more anything we missed, I think we're nearing the end here. Did you have any subtopics that we didn't get to, LML, that you wanted to bring up? Anything that we missed?
Let's see here. Go back over all this. So we talked about the Quaithe Ashai thing. I think we hit it pretty good. We talked about potentially, maybe Arya or Asha Greyjoy if there's going to be somebody that sails west in the future. We talked about crazy Stark tinfoil based on Brandon the Shipwright. We got the Selkies and the Farwinds, and I think it's been a pretty good time. What does the chat think? Does the chat have any other last requests for something to talk about that's related?
That just kind of tickled me. It's really dumb, but I still kind of got a kick out of it. I just thought it was funny that, we have Corlys has his bastard sons, Adam and Alan, and Alan is the other seafaring one.
Yeah.
I just think it's nice that it's Alan, Alyn, and obviously Corlys would have looked up to Alice Westhill. Anyways, it's very, I don't think it's a thing, but I still liked it.
I think it could be a thing.
I like it. I like it.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
That's really good, yeah. Especially because he probably named them.
Yeah,
or maybe Marilda did.
Yeah, maybe she did.
But she would know that he was a big fan. She would have also loved Alice Westhill.
You would think so. So anyways, I like that they went with her new pseudonym there.
That's pretty cool. Chixela Brab has another idea for Sunchaser, suggesting that it was found like that and someone just towed it to port. Like there was no crew. It wasn't abandoned at Ashai. It was found elsewhere, abandoned, and someone just hauled it. That's a good theory. You never know. You
Yeah.
can't. Obviously, we have no proof of any of these ideas, but that absolutely fits. I like it. Okay, yeah. So, okay, Joe Magician says Corlys would have had a poster of Elissa on his wall. Yes.
Yes.
On his west wall. And Marvin Martin says Naga is actually an ancient word for dragon lizard, like people. Yeah, Nagas. There's Nagas all over architecture in the Far East.
India,
Buddhist
stuff
architecture.
like that.
What's that?
A lot of good Naga.
Yeah, Sanskrit.
myths.
They're usually, a lot of times they're wise. So, and Marvin Martin, another good comment here. Speaking of Lovecraft, if Euron and Dany have a baby, they should name it Dagon the Conqueror. D-A-E. Of course, Dagon is.
Oh, I like it.
That's
Totally.
good.
Oh, that's really good. That's very good. Nice one, Marvin.
Okay, so if you have questions or comments for us for future live streams, you want to reach us in any other way, you can always email us at westeroshistory@gmail.com. We're at Westeros History on Twitter. Please join our Facebook group as well. We have wonderful admins, mods who...
It's been really active in our Facebook group, honestly.
Yeah. Really good discussions there. We're approaching 1,400 people now, and a lot of good conversations starting. Fire and Blood discussions, season 8 discussions.
And if you're not on Facebook and don't really want to be on Facebook, I will mention that other podcasts like Nauticast and stuff like that, they have their Facebook groups as well. So there's multiple reasons for you to join and just use the Facebook groups.
So we'll be back. We'll be back
for not using Facebook.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be back next week at the same time. So LML, please, again, tell everybody where to find you. Give us your Twitter, your website, all that good stuff, and restate.
Give us your home address.
your phone number.
Where you'll be every day for the next week.
Your pant size. And tell everybody what you're doing, what you got coming up, and all that.
So you can find all of my stuff by the name Lucifer Means Lightbringer. That's the .com. That's the YouTube channel. The podcast, if you're looking for the podcast in iTunes or something, is...
You cut out for a second. So we'll never know where to find you. I'm just going to give it a second while you're... at least this didn't happen much during the stream.
Yeah, it's nice timing.
You can find LML at Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire, and you can also find him at Between Two Werewoods. I'll just tell it for him because he's totally frozen.
He has 2 channels these days. He has his live stream channel where that's Between Two Werewoods, and it's a great recurring show on Sundays, and every Sunday at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, and it's a lot of people refer to it as Fandom Church, where the myth heads meet. So
I just want to click on his frozen face here.
Yeah, his internet is just gone. Well, anyway, hopefully, so I know that he's got plenty of things coming up. So if we have, you can scroll back to the beginning of the episode to hear all that again.
He's got some stuff on Sarnor, he was saying.
Yeah.
As part of it.
He just did we just did that episode on Sunday.
Sarnor is actually one of my favorite topics in all the series.
Right,
really
yeah,
like
Sarnor is really cool.
It's really intriguing to me.
Another excellent world building example by George.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, because we took so long today, I'm going to skip the end credits.
Okay.
Because we're so long over.
You are going to grab a cat before I get this intro outro going, right?
Okay, cool.
He's right there for you. I give the people what they want, and I know this is what they want. Deep down. It's okay, you can get it. I'm getting the intro outro. We're going to say goodbye to you in a second. Oh, Jaken's a big fat boy in his box. Here we go. Very good. Here's the new star of our show.
The cat of black and white.
Yeah, anyways.
Saying
He's
goodbye.
Been sleeping in his box the entire episode. We've been going for about 2 hours and 35 minutes, and he's been here probably 30 minutes before, too. He's like, now I have to get going. But anyways.
He can have my seat. Well, on behalf of LML, Valar Rereadus, my fellow Westorians, and I'm glad Ashaya was able to join us today. Say goodbye, everybody. Valar Rereadus.